Hey everyone, welcome to the Beginner's Bible Study Classroom. I'm your teacher, Isaac Israel, and our lesson today is going to be the biblical definition of sin and some hidden forms of sin. I hope you got your Bibles out and ready, and of course your Bible should be a King James 1611 version Bible, because that's the only version that's not contaminated with some denomination's doctrine. But we'll get into that in another lesson. I also have pen and paper out to take notes, by having an open mind that you can take note of what you're about to read with your own eyes. Now, I want to say this about this lesson. This is going to be a special lesson. I'm gonna do some things here that I'm not going to do in most other Bible study lessons, the beginner's Bible study classroom. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to mix together all the classrooms in this one lesson: the beginner's Bible study classroom, the Apprentice classroom, the master class, and initiation classroom. I'm going to do a little bit of all four in this one lesson. So only get ready. You go see the level of teaching in each classroom. Again, starting from the beginner's Bible study classroom, the apprentice classroom, the master classroom, and initiation. You go understand the different level, how it keep on going up levels in those classrooms. Now let's begin this lesson. We're going to start this lesson off in 1 John, the 3rd chapter. Go to 1 John, the 3rd chapter. And we go start reading at verse 4. 1 John 3, and we go start reading at verse 4. Okay, man, let's start reading. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law. For sin is the transgression of the law. That we just read, brothers and sisters, is the biblical definition of sin. It says, for sin is the transgression of the law. Now, we could simply just go home from here. We understand what sin is now. We could just go home based off this one verse. It says, whosoever committed sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. It can't get any plainer than that. This could be a one verse lesson like most charlatan preachers make their lessons out to be. And they charlatans because they imposing themselves as Israelite priests when they're not Israel. They could make this a one verse lesson just like they do. Today's lesson, today's 2-hour lesson, is going to come from St. John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. For whosoever believes in him should not perish but have an everlasting life. And blah, 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 blah. But we're not going to do that in this lesson. We're going to do more than one verse in this lesson. And we ain't going to never do that at the Gathering of Israel to have a one verse lesson. That is foolishness. The Bible teaches us that you're supposed to teach line upon line, here a little and there a little. That's what it's saying in Isaiah. And that's what we're going to do in this lesson. Not only that, we're going to do here, beginner's Bible study class here, apprentice classroom there, and a little of master class and a little initiation course. We're going to do that in this special lesson. Now, let's go read this again in the Old Testament. And by the way, this is the New Testament. Where it says sin is the transgression of the law. This is the New Testament, and this is years after Jesus crucified. He was crucified, died, and resurrected from the grave. And sin is still defined as transgression of the law by John. Years after Jesus died and resurrected from the grave. That's still the biblical definition of sin. The transgression of the law. Now, let's go read this in the Old Testament and see where John get this definition of sin from. Let's go to Leviticus, the 4th chapter. Go to Leviticus, the 4th chapter, and start reading the verse. We're going to start reading the verse 1. Leviticus, the 4th chapter, and we're going to start reading the verse 1. Okay, I'm going to start reading. And the Lord spake unto Moses. So what we're about to read is what the Lord spake. Not no one else, not even Moses. It's what the Lord spake. And what the Lord's about to speak is what he think sin, what his definition of sin. We're about to find out what God think is the definition of sin is. So I think we need to pay attention to what God about to say here. Verse 1 again. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a soul should sin through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord concerning things which ought not to be done, and shall do against any of them. Now, this is basically the same thing we just read in 1 John 3rd chapter, verse 4. That sin is the transgression of the law. That's what God's saying. That's what God is saying right here. That's why John said it in 1 John 3rd chapter. That's what John got it from. Sin, God, the Lord said, if a soul should sin through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord, because sin is the transgression of God's law, or you could say sin is the transgression of God's commandments. That is sin. It's what you are reading with your own eyes. That's the biblical definition of sin. Transgression of God's law or transgression of God's commandments. And you heard God say that. You go read 3 more times. God say sin is the transgression of the law in this lesson. Go read it 3 more times. Now let's read verse 3 and we'll keep on reading. We'll skip down to verse 13 after we read verse 3. Verse 3. If the priest that is anointed do sin according to the sin of the people, again, sin is the transgression of the law. If the priest that is anointed do sin according to the sin of the people, then let him bring forth his sin, which he hath sinned, a young bullock without blemish unto the Lord for a sin offering. So, brothers and sisters, when we sin, we need to come to God. We need to make it up to God and pay up to God by some sort of offering. Not only the common people, we read here, the priest got to do the same thing. So, I Jehoiada got to do the same thing you got to do. If I sin, I got to make it up to God and pay up to God by some sort of offering. We got to make it up. Why we got to make it up? Because we transgressed against it. That's sinning, and sinning is the transgression of the law. Now, let's skip down to verse 13. Skip down to verse 13. I'm there, let's read. And if the whole congregation of Israel sin through ignorance. There go those 3 words again, sin through ignorance. We read it in verse, what's that? We read it in verse 2. Now we're reading again in verse 13. Sin through ignorance. So what does that mean, brothers and sisters? Sin through ignorance. That means regardless if you understand God's law or understand God's commandments or not, you still can sin against Him. So it's pointless to try not know about it on purpose. As if you go get away with something. He called it sin through ignorance. You still can sin. Regardless if you know you are sinning or not, you still can sin against God. And I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, as we go in this lesson, you're going to understand what that means. It don't get you out of trouble because you do it in ignorance. It doesn't get you out of trouble. You're going to understand that in this lesson. Verse 13 again. And if the whole congregation of Israel sin through ignorance, and the thing be hid from the eyes of the assembly, and they have done somewhat against any of the commandments of the Lord, again, this is the second time we're reading this. God's sin is the transgression of His law or the transgression of His commandments. That's the second time we're reading it. Start again from the second half of verse 13. And the thing be hid from the eyes of the assembly, and they have done somewhat against any of the commandments of the Lord concerning things which should not be done, and are guilty. When the sin which they have sinned against it, it says here in verse 14, when the sin which they have sinned against it. What is this it? This it is God's commandments. You sin against it. That's what this it is. God's commandments or God's law. Sin is a it. And to sin against it means you sinning against God's law. Sin is not something metaphysical that we just make up as we go. Based on culture, how culture changed from one generation to the next. Then from the last generation, it was sin, but in this generation, it's not. Then we keep on going to the next generation. Then that following generation, the thing is not sin no more. It becomes, that's what the world based its definition of sin is. It used to be adultery was sin. Now basically it's not no more. It used to be homosexuality was sin. Now it's not no more. Why? Because sin keeps changing. From generation to generation, it keeps changing. But we read here, you sin against it. It stands forever. And it's it again, it's God's commandment. It's something you can sin against. It's a tangible thing out there. It's an it, brothers and sisters. Verse 14 again. When the sin which they have sinned against it is known, then the congregation shall offer a young bullock for the sin and bring him before the tabernacle of the congregation. There it is again. When you sin against God, you got to make it up to God and pay up to God. That's some sort of offering. You got to make it up and you got to pay up when you sin. Apparently every time you sin, you got to make it up. Even if you sin through ignorance, as we read twice. Even if you sin through ignorance. Now, brothers, let's read all this again and even more deeper. Let's go to Leviticus, the 5th chapter. Let's go to the next chapter. And we go start reading at verse 14. Leviticus 5 and verse 14. Okay, now let's start reading. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, again, this is the Lord speaking. This is not Moses speaking. This is the Lord speaking. He about to speak again what he believes sin is to him. And what God believes sin is to him, we better believe it as well. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, if a soul commit a trespass. Now, what is the soul right here? We've been over that in the previous lesson. This is a human body. This is a human person or a human body. It's not an astrophysical form inside a human body that goes off to God after it dies. We've already been over that. This is what the soul is. This is a person right here. Okay? And like we read in Leviticus 4th chapter, it's a person. A soul is a person right here. If a soul commit a trespass and sin through ignorance in the holy things of the Lord, that he should bring for his trespass unto the Lord a ram without blemish out of the flocks. We keep reading the same thing. When you sin, you need to make it up to God and pay up to God by some sort of offering. We keep reading that. And as you go on with my teaching, you go understand that in deeper levels. When you sin, brothers and sisters, you got to make it up and pay up with some sort of offering. It's not this time as animal sacrifice. And when we get into the master class, I'm gonna teach you each offering: the burnt offering, the sin offering, the meat offering, the wave offering, trespass. I'm gonna teach you all those offerings in different master classes, so you go understand what these offerings are, and you go understand it's all about animal sacrifice. Animal sacrifice is pointing to something else. It was pointing to when you sin, you got to make it up and pay up. That's what it was pointing to. Okay, verse 15 again. If a soul commit a trespass and sin through ignorance in the holy things of the Lord, then he should bring for his trespass unto the Lord a ram without blemish out of the flocks, with that estimation, that shekels of silver, after the shekel of the sanctuary for a trespass offering. Now let's skip down to verse 17. And if a soul sin and commit any of these things which are forbidden to be done by the commandments of the Lord, there it is for the third time. Sin, the definition of sin to God is the transgression of his commandments. This is the third time we're reading that God said this. So this is the fourth time we're reading this lesson already. Sin is the transgression of God's commandments or the transgression of the law. That's what sin is. That's why John said that in 1 John 3rd, 4th chapter. That is the biblical definition of sin, the transgression of God's law. And he just read God say that 3 times. Verse 17 again. And if a soul sin and commit any of these things which are forbidden to be done by the commandments of the Lord, though he wist it not, yet is he guilty and should bear his iniquity. Now, brothers and sisters, we learn something else. If you sin against God, even if you sin in ignorance, let's say though he wist it not, yet he guilty and should bear his iniquity. Though you sin in ignorance, brothers and sisters, you still bear iniquity. You still bear iniquity, even if you sin. So you cannot hide from God's commandments by trying to not know about them, because you go bear iniquity. You're going to bear iniquity. You go understand what that means in this lesson. And other lessons I'm going to teach you too. You bear iniquity regardless if you know about God's law and you still sin against him, or you don't know about God's law and you sin. You go bear iniquity. So what we should do, brothers and sisters, we need to learn about God's commandments and know as many commandments as we can and keep them. Because it's not going to help us, nor is it going to save us to be ignorant of these commandments, because we still go bear iniquity. God said that. Not Isaac Jehoiada said that. Isaac Jehoiada read it to you. God said here in verse 17, let's read it again. If a soul sin and commit any of these things which are forbidden to be done by the commandments of the Lord, though he wist it not, yet is he guilty and should bear his iniquity. That's what God said. That's what God said. Let's finish this. Let's continue to read. Verse 18. And he should bring a ram without blemish out of the flock without estimation for a trespass offering unto the priest. So, even when you sin in ignorance, you trespass against the Lord. Even when you sin. So people think if you boldly sin against God, presumptuously sin against God, you trespass against him. Not just that. If you sin in ignorance, you trespass against God. So, plainly, if you sin, you trespass against God. Whether you know it or not, you trespass. And you got to make it up and pay up with some sort of offering. Here the Lord said, it's the trespass offering. But I know some of you say, didn't Jesus do everything for me? Didn't Jesus do it all for us? He did all the sin. He did all the sin offering for us. But he didn't do it all for us. Yeah, you just heard me say that. Jesus did not do it all for us. He did all the sin offering for us. There are still other offerings that need to be made when someone sinned against God, whether they do it in ignorance or not. There's still other offerings that need to be made. Here, the trespass offering. Jesus didn't do no trespass offering. He did the sin offering. That's why when you read in Luke the 14th chapter, I believe it's verse 27, Jesus said, whoever go follow me, you have to bear your own cross. I'm paraphrasing, but basically he said, whoever won't follow me have to bear their own cross. Again, I'm paraphrasing. This is basically what he said. If you go follow me, you have to bear your own cross. That don't sound like something that's said from somebody who has did it all for us. He said you got to bear your own cross. That means you got to do something too. You got to make up. You got to make an offering. You got to pay up to God too. Jesus did the sin offering. He didn't do all the offerings. You're going to learn about the trespass offering. You can read about Paul's missionary life. Whereas you read a lot about it in the latter part of the book of Acts. All the trials and tribulation that Paul went through. All the near-death encounters that he went through. All the imprisonments he went through. That was the trespass offering. Because he persecuted the church. He had people set in prison. He sat there while a holy man was getting stoned to death and helped people and washed people clothes while they were stoning him to death. And that's why Jesus said things like Acts 9th chapter that he gonna have to go through a lot of stuff. For God, for the name of the Lord, he gonna have to go through a lot of stuff, basically. Because he trespassed against God, that he got to make up this trespass offering. But if Jesus did everything for Paul, why did Paul have to go through all that? Because Jesus didn't do everything for Paul. He did all the sin offering. He didn't do everything for us. He did all the sin offering. There's other offerings that need to be made. Master class 1, we're going to talk about the burnt offering. Now let's continue. Let's finish this up. Verse 18, and we go continue to verse 19 and end it there. And he shall bring the ram without blemish out of the flock, without estimation, for a trespass offering unto the priest, and the priest shall make an atonement for him concerning his ignorance, wherein he erred and wist it not. And it should be forgiven him. Again, it say and wist it not, which means he still trespassed against God, even though he didn't know he was doing it, or she didn't know she was doing it. She still trespassed. Verse 19, it is a trespass offering. He hath certainly trespassed against the Lord, and the Lord said that he hath certainly trespassed against the Lord. And we talking about somebody who did it in ignorance. Remember, verse 17 said he wist it not, but the Lord say certainly. God don't play with the transgression of his law. It's why? Because it's sin. You sin against it. He does not play with it. Now, let's go to Joshua the 6th chapter and see what else we bear, or the whole congregation can bear, and which it not. We learned here in Leviticus the 5th chapter, you bear iniquity, you can bear iniquity, and which it not, and don't know you are bearing iniquity on you. And God says, certainly you have trespass. Go to Joshua the 6th chapter. We go start reading at verse 16. Joshua the 6th chapter. We go start reading at verse 16. And it came to pass at the seventh time, when the priests blew with the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, shout, the Lord hath given you the city. Now this is the time where Joshua and the men of war and basically all of Israel was taking the promised land. They was conquering the promised land, conquering all these Canaanite tribes, all these city states. So they was going, this is around that time, and Jericho was a big, powerful city. It was a walled city. And something happened here. And we're about to read it. And God go say something that happened here. We're going to read that as well. Verse 17. And the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein, to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the message that we sent. And you and any wise keep yourselves from the cursed thing, lest you make yourselves a curse. You take of the cursed thing and make the camp of Israel a curse and trouble. Brothers and sisters, I'm about to show you that not only you can sin through ignorance, and when you sin through ignorance, that you can bear iniquity, you can also be cursed by God. This is what we're about to read. A curse. You could be a curse of God and not know it. Because you sin in ignorance, or somebody that is entangled with you sin in ignorance. God say here, he entangled the whole camp of Israel together. Not to do this one thing. Do not take of the cursed thing in verse 18. He say, and make the camp of Israel a curse. So no one in Israel can do this one thing. That's take the cursed thing. Verse 19, but all the silver and gold and vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. Now the Lord has consecrated the silver, gold, vessels of brass, and iron, all these things he consecrated unto himself. Later on, you can read in Joshua the 8th chapter, in verse 2, he let Israel start to get stuff too, but he first, like we learned in the time lesson, the increase goes to God first. Goes to God first because he did the creation. It goes to him first. That's what he's doing here. The increase will go to the treasury of the Lord first. Then, again, you can read in Joshua the 8th chapter, then start in verse 2. You can read, then Israel could increase themselves with the spoil of war. But the spoil of war goes to God's first. And that's what he's doing here. That's why I make it a curse. That should let you know something about paying tithe. You could be a curse. If you know that you're supposed, even you do it in ignorance, brothers and sisters, you can bear iniquity. You can even be a curse. Now, but we got a little bit on that paying tithe lesson. Start to keep up this lesson, and it's the biblical definition of sin. Verse 20. So the people shouted when the priest blew the trumpets, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet. You know what? Let's skip. Let's go to Joshua the 7th chapter. That's my bad. We're in at verse 19. We go to Joshua the 7th chapter. Let's go to Joshua 7th chapter and start reading at verse 1. Okay, but the children of Israel committed a trespass and a cursed thing. But Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah, took of the cursed thing, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against the children of Israel. Now what we have here, we have one man, and we're going to read later, his family also. Him and his family took of the cursed thing, and the anger of the Lord, and the Lord was angry against all Israel. Why against all Israel when only one family did? It's because we read in verse 7, we read in verse 18, Joshua 6 and verse 18, the whole camp of Israel, no one can take of this cursed thing. No one. He entangled the whole congregation with each other. There's nothing outside. You entangle together because you coming together to take all these other nations out and take their land. So no one can be transgressing God's laws, especially at this moment. Can't be transgressing. Start at verse 2. And Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is beside Beth-aven, on the east side of Bethel, and spake unto them, saying, Go up and view the country. And the man went up and viewed Ai. Now, while this is going on, Joshua about to conquer another city-state. They don't know that Achan and his family did this thing and took this accursed thing, took some of this material wealth out of Jericho. They didn't know it. Somebody say so. Sin would mean what? Sin is done in ignorance. And again, you can bear your iniquity even when you sin against ignorance. And we're gonna learn here. You could be accursed if you sin in ignorance. We're gonna see what this curse is. Verse 3. And they returned to Joshua and said unto him, Let not all the people go up, but let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and smite Ai, and make not all the people to labor thither, for they are but few. Now Israel got a little bit arrogant. They started destroying cities, and they went on it. I mean, they started being lackadaisical. When you're having too much success, you start being lackadaisical. You better whatever got you your success, continue it on and continue on forever. Don't get lackadaisical. You can't get lackadaisical. How you expect the Father's kingdom to be living? I mean, to everybody be doing righteousness forever, because you can't get lackadaisical. But we get into that in initiation. Cannot get lackadaisical. Now, verse 3 again, we'll keep on reading. And they returned to Joshua and said unto him, Let not all the people go up, but let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and smite Ai, and make not all the people to labor thither, for they are but few. So there went up thither the people, about 3,000 men, and they fled before the men of Ai. And the man of Ai smote of them about 36 men, for they chased them from before the gate even to Shebarim. Now, because of what one man and his family did, take up the cursed thing, 36 men of the army end up dying from a city state which they had first believed that ain't really nothing. Just send 3,000 men to take them out. We don't really need to send the whole army or even a big part of them. Just send 3,000 men to take them out. But 36 men died because one man cursed the whole camp. And the camp didn't know what had happened. So the camp had sinned in ignorance, but 36 people died. Which means what, brothers and sisters? You can sin in ignorance and somebody can end up dying because somebody sinned in ignorance. Which further means what? Again, we need to understand as many of God's commandments as we can, so we won't bear iniquity. And we learn it here, we won't bear a curse upon us. We need to learn about as much as we can. Verse 5 again. And the man of Ai smote of them about 36 men, for they chased them from before the gate even to Shebarim, and smote them in the going down. Wherefore the hearts of the people melted and became as water. Now Israel became as water. Now they got a little afraid. They got scared now, because they know they're in the middle of all these nations that hate them. Now they are conquering these nations, but you're going really in the midst of them. They hear about this one victory of this small city that beat you up. They go start, these people ain't invincible after all, and this God of Israel is not invincible after all. Let's go get them. That's what they was afraid of. They knew that was going to happen, because they was in the midst of their enemies doing this. They in the midst of all these Canaanite tribes, all these Canaanite city-states with all these city-state kings who will just lick their chop to see any little weakness in Israel. And Israel know it. That's why they said in verse 5, the hearts of the people melted and became as water. They got scared. Verse 6, and Joshua rent his clothes and fell to the earth upon his face before the ark of the Lord unto the eventide, he and the elders of Israel, and put dust upon their heads. And Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, wherefore hast thou at all brought this people over Jordan to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites, to destroy us? Would to God we had been content and dwelt on the other side of Jordan. Now basically Joshua wanted to throw his hands up like, man, okay, we got enough, Lord. We could have stayed on the east side of Jordan. He didn't have to come to the west side of Jordan, but the Lord promised, he already promised Abraham he would have that. So he had to go. And he had to sing. He already promised Abraham all that. But they didn't understand, and Joshua didn't understand that somebody's sin was done in ignorance. Sin was done in ignorance in the camp. He couldn't learn what the sin is. Okay, verse 8. O Lord, what should I say when Israel turned back before their enemies? Again, Israel got scared because they know the enemies would have heard that they got defeated by this small city and would have came against them. Verse 9. But the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land should hear of it and should environ us round and cut off our name from the earth. And what would thou do unto that great name? And Joshua said, what would thou do unto that great name? Because Israel is God's name. We'll begin to another lesson. Verse 10. And the Lord said unto Joshua, get thee up. Wherefore liest thou this thus upon thy face? And the Lord said that to Joshua like he's supposed to know what happened. But that's how God look at it. God look at sin like it's sin. He don't care if you do it in ignorance or if you do it presumptuously. You do it boldly, you do it willfully. He sees sin. This is why this is why God reacted like this. Like you should, like Joshua's supposed to know what happened. That's why he reacted like this. And the Lord said unto Joshua, get thee up, wherefore liest thou thus upon thy face? God don't care if it's sin, if it's done in ignorance, or if it's done willfully. He don't care. It's still sin to him. Though he wish it not, yet he's guilty and should bear his iniquity. That's what we read in Leviticus, the 5th chapter. Verse 11. This is what God said. This is what the Lord said unto Joshua. Verse 11. Israel hath sinned, and they have also transgressed my covenant which I commanded them. Brothers and sisters, this is the 4th time we have read that God says that sin is the transgression of the law or the transgression of his commandments. This is the 4th time we read this. Israel hath sinned, and they have also transgressed my covenant which I have commanded them. So, brothers and sisters, what do you think is the biblical definition of sin? If God says sin is the transgression of the law. Sin is the transgression of the law. It's that simple, brothers and sisters. That's the biblical definition of sin. That's the sin out of the mouth of God. That's the definition of sin out of the mouth of God. The transgression of God's commandments, or the transgression of his law, or you can say transgression of his covenant. That is sin. We read this the 4th time we read this, that God said this, and this is the 5th time we read this overall, that sin is the transgression of the law. Verse 11 again. Israel have sinned, and they have also transgressed my covenant which I commanded them. For they have taken of the accursed thing, and have also stolen, and dissembled also, and they have put it even amongst their own stuff. So it looked like that Achan and again go read later, his family, they really had this planned out. They said, we're gonna take the gold, the silver, we're gonna make us earrings, we're gonna make us this and that with it. That's why God say have taken the cursed thing and have stolen and dissembled also, and they have put it even more. They dissembled it, which means they created stuff out of it. They not only stole it and like, oh man, we guilty, but and hid it. They made plans for it and put it even among their own stuff. They really went in and transgressing against God. They went in on it. That's why they had to be destroyed. Verse 12. Therefore the children of Israel could not stand before their enemies, but turned their backs before their enemies, because they were accursed. Neither will I be with you anymore, except you destroy the curse from amongst you. So God told Joshua that I will not be with Israel until you destroy their accursed thing from among you. Now, before this happened, remember, they didn't know that Achan did this. We read Joshua 7:1. We read it, but Joshua and them didn't know what was going on. It was sin done in ignorance. And again, though he wished it not, he's still guilty and bears iniquity. And again, we read here, you could bear being accursed too. Though you wish it not, though the congregation wish it not, what happened? You still could bear it. That's why we need to learn about these commandments and keep them. Verse 13, up, sanctify the people, and say, sanctify yourselves against tomorrow, for thus saith the Lord God of Israel, there is an accursed thing in the midst of thee, O Israel. Thou canst not stand before thine enemies until you take away the cursed thing from among you. And in verse 12, he said you need to destroy it. Not just take it away, you got to destroy it among you. Now, Israel went through a whole process of put our tribes together. Then they took Judah. Then they took certain families of Judah. Then they took one specific family in Judah. Then they took man by man, and they finally got to Acon. They went through that process. You can read on down on your own, but we strive for time. We go skip down to verse 19. Verse 19, and Joshua said unto Acon, my son, give, I pray thee, glory to the Lord God of Israel, and make confession unto him, and tell me now what thou hast done, had it not for me. We learn some other stuff right here, brothers and sisters. Even when you sin this grossly against God, you still got to give glory to God. I'm going to get into that in the lessons. You still have to give glory unto God eventually. That's why I say a thing in Philippians that every knee shall bow to the name of Jesus. That just don't mean everyone who will get into the kingdom. Those people, most of those people will be bound and will get thrown like a fire. You still have to give glory unto God, even though you sin against him. He gonna make everyone still give glory. You gonna give it sooner or later. We might as well give it now and keep his commandments. Verse 19 again, and Joshua said unto Acon, my son, give, I pray thee, glory to the Lord God of Israel, and make confession unto him, and tell me now what thou hast done, had it not for me. Verse 20, and Acon answered Joshua and said, indeed, I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and thus have I done. And that sin he did was transgress God's covenant or his commandments, which we read in verse 11. Verse 21, when I saw among the spoils a goodly Babylonian garment, 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold of 50 shekels weight, then I coveted them and took them. And behold, they are hid in the earth in the midst of my tent, and the silver under it. Doesn't the Ten Commandments say thou should not covet? And Acon coveted what belonged to God. God said those things are supposed to go into his treasury. So he covered something that belonged to God, not just to his neighbor. He covered something that directly belonged to God. That's why he had to be destroyed and destroyed quickly. That's why when you take something from God, you are accursed. I mean, you take something directly from God, you are immediately accursed to be destroyed. That's what happened to what was the king name? Nebuchadnezzar's son or grandson, whatever he was to him, Belshazzar, in Daniel the 5th chapter. He went and messed around, took the golden vessels of the Lord. That when Nebuchadnezzar went in to destroy Judah and destroyed the temple, he took all the silvers, gold, all that was in the temple and brought it and stored it somewhere in Babylon, but not to touch it. But his son Belshazzar, or part of his grandson Belshazzar, went in and had a little party where he made a party out to all his lords and all his wives and concubines. He said, "Go get those, get those treasures of the God of Israel, and let's use those to party with him and praise the God of wood and stone, praise the God of gold or silver. Basically, praise the God of material things. Let's use the material of the true and living God and praise the God of material things." That's basically what he did. And God sent the angel that only showed his hand, wrote something on the wall, and said, basically, I'm going to kill you. Your kingdom is given to others, and you go die tonight, basically. That's what he said. And that's basically what happened. He said he's going to take the kingdom from you. And what happened? That king got killed that same night. Because when you covet something that belongs directly to God, and you're going to be that bold to take it, you got to be destroyed immediately. You have to be destroyed immediately. But we'll get into that other lessons. Now, where was that? Verse 21 again. And I saw among the spoils of a goodly Babylonian garment, and 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold of 50 shekels. Wait, then I coveted them, and took them, and behold, they are hid in the earth, in the midst of my tent, and the silver under. That's what God said. He put it among his own stuff. Verse 22. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran unto the tent, and behold, it was hid in his tent, and the silver under it. And they took them out of the midst of the tent and brought them unto Joshua and to all the children of Israel, and laid them out before the Lord. And Joshua and all Israel with him took Acon the son of Zerah, and the silver and the garment and the wedge of gold, and his sons and his daughters. So his family was in only two. He don't say nothing about his wife or nothing. So He wasn't married. I mean, his wife died or something, or she wasn't in on it. She was a smart woman if he was married and she wasn't in on it. Sometimes it can happen. I'm teaching other lessons that a man was destroyed, but his children didn't follow him. And destruction looked like here that his wife probably didn't follow him, but his children did. And read verse 24 again. And Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan the son of Zerah and the silver, and the garment, and the wedge of gold, and his sons and his daughters, and say nothing about his wife, or if he had multiple wives, and say nothing about them, because he probably was smart enough not to follow him. Again, wives, if your husband trying to do something that's presumptuously against God's commandments, you're not to follow him. He's doing something very presumptuously against God's commandments. Now, in the master class, I teach you what those is. So don't assume if he tell you to obey him, that's against God's commandments. Let's not play games now, because some women will be that stupid and try to play games. Let's not play games. If he tell you to obey him, that's not against God's covenant. Let's not be stupid. Verse 24. And Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan the son of Zerah, and the silver, and the garment, and the wedge of gold, and his sons and his daughters, and his oxen, his asses, and his sheep, and his tent, and all that he had, and they brought them unto the valley of Achor. When you sin against God, he won't destroy. You sin really bad against God, he destroyed everything that has something to do with you and everything that has something to do with you. He even took the animals with him to be destroyed. Verse 25. And Joshua said, why hast thou troubled us? The Lord shall trouble thee this day. And all Israel stoned him with stones and burnt them with fire. After they had stoned them with stones, they really destroyed them. Not only did they stone them to death, they burnt them after they stoned them. They wanted to make a point. They wanted to make sure that curse was off them. Stoned them to death, then burnt them. And after that, verse 26, and they raised over him a great heap of stones unto this day. So the Lord turned from his fierceness of his anger, wherefore the name of that place was called the valley of Achor unto this day. So they stoned Achan, his sons, and his daughters to death. They burnt them with fire and raised a heap over them, over all the ashes. To make a point, you are not to covet what belongs to God, which calls you to curse people. But again, brothers, I brought you here for two reasons. First, we read the fourth time that God said that sin, in verse 11, Joshua 7:11, that sin is the transgression of the law. That's the fourth time we read God said that. And number two reason that I brought you here, because even if you sin in ignorance, you can be accursed, and it can cause people to die when you sin in ignorance. But I know some of you wondering, we can't know every law. And we can't know every law. It got to be something that can save us. Even when we sin in ignorance, it got to be something. I'm going to teach you what that something is in the last verse we're going to read in this lesson. I'm going to teach you what that is. It's going to be something that you need to do in order to be all still go sin in ignorance. I don't care who we are, how much we know, how long we've been studying. We go sin in ignorance. But it's one thing we can do that can save us each and every year. I'm going to teach you what that is at the end of this lesson. Now, let's go to Romans, the 6th chapter. After sin is done, what happens? We'll read one verse. Romans 6 and verse 23. Some of you veterans know what I'm about to read. Romans 6 and verse 23. Okay, I'm going to start reading. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. So, brothers and sisters, the first part of this verse says, the wages of sin is death. The payment of your sin is death. That's what ultimately is going to happen. And not only the physical death, if you go read later, the second death is going to happen to you. And what is sin? See, I will say, for the wages of transgressing God's law is death. Because we read that 5 times already. Sin is the transgression of the law. So the wages of transgressing God's law is death. That's what it is, brothers and sisters. It's death. Transgressing God's law is death. So if you hear somebody saying God's law is no more, what are they doing? They speaking death. They speaking death to you when they say God's law is no more. They speaking death to you, and even the second death in the lake of fire to you. That's what they speak. I'm going to prove that in this lesson. And the last part I say, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord, because Jesus did the sin offering. Because after sin is done, you got to make up and pay up to God by some sort of offering, and Jesus did the sin offering for us. He did the sin offering, but there are other offerings that need to be made. You can read all over Leviticus, all these different offerings. Sin offering is just one offering. It's the most important offering. The sin offering is the most important offering. It is the greatest offering, but it's still only one offering. God requires a lot because he did a lot when he did this creation. So he should require a lot. Now, let's go to 1 Samuel, the 15th chapter. Let's go to 1 Samuel, the 15th chapter. And we're going to start reading in verse 24. Go to 1 Samuel, the 15th chapter, and we're going to start reading in verse 24. So when I get there, we're going to start reading. Around now, let's start reading. Verse 24. And Saul said unto Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord. Brothers and sisters, that's the sixth time we have read in this lesson. I believe it's the sixth time we have read in this lesson that sin is the transgression of the law. We keep reading the same thing. And Saul said unto Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord. Saul did not say, I have sinned because I like to dance. I like to play cards. I like to gamble. I like to smoke. I like to drink. That is not sinning, brothers and sisters. Now, if you do it in excess and with the wrong crowd, it probably can make you sin, but it's not sin in itself. Dancing, smoking, drinking, playing cards, gambling, all that is not sin in itself. Again, if you do it in excess and with the wrong crowd, you probably are going to sin. But it's not sin in itself. Do all that in moderation and with the right crowd or by yourself if you have to. And Saul said unto Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord. And that words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Oh, this is the key thing. This is why people sin. Because they fear the people, they fear other people and don't fear God, which makes them obey people and not obey God. This is why people transgress the law. Because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Oh, that's why people say God's law is no more, because they're afraid other people are saying the same thing and behaving the same way. Behaving that way. There ain't no law no more. Jesus did it all for us. Jesus did all the sin offering. He didn't do it all for us. He did the sin offering. There's still the offerings that need to be made. The one offering that be made, you got to continue to keep God's commandments. That is an offering up to God. I'm going to teach you what kind of offering that is in one of the master classes. Now, verse 25. Now, therefore, I pray thee, pardon my sin and turn again with me that I may worship the Lord. Pardon my transgression of the law and turn again with me that I may worship the Lord. What did Samuel say unto Saul? Verse 26. And Samuel said unto Saul, I will not return with thee, for thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord hath rejected thee from being king over Israel. So, brothers and sisters, that will happen when you transgress the law and sin, which is sin, transgressing the law. You obey the voice of man over the voice of God. You will be rejected by God from doing that. So if you sin, you will bear iniquity. If you sin, you can be accursed by God. And if you sin, you can be rejected by God. So what that means to us, brothers and sisters, in our life and in our soul, concerning our life and concerning our soul, we need to understand God's law and not sin. That's what it means, because we could bear iniquity. We could be cursed, which could cause lives to be taken. I'm going to read to you later, your life could be taken. And God will reject us because we rejected his law and listened to man instead of listening to him. That's what's going on here. That's what we learn here. Verse 26 again. And Samuel said unto Saul, I will not return with thee, for thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord hath rejected thee from being king over Israel. You can be rejected when you reject the word of the Lord. You can be rejected. Now, brothers and sisters, that was the beginner's Bible study classroom. And in the first form of sin in the beginner's Bible study classroom is the transgression of the law. That is beginner's Bible study classroom. Now let's switch to the apprentice Bible study classroom. Let's switch to the apprentice Bible study classroom. Let's start in Matthew the 15th chapter. Go to Matthew the 15th chapter and we're going to learn our second form of sin. And this starting off our hidden form of sin. The sin being the transgression of the law, that's not hidden. That's right in front of your face. That's concerning the technical part of God's law. The letter of the law. Now we're going to read in the apprentice class right now, we're going to learn about the spirit of the law, which you could transgress. Matthew the 15th chapter. Matthew the 15th chapter, and we're going to start reading verse 1. And I'm going to speed up a little bit because I see now a lot of time went by. Matthew the 15th chapter and verse 1. They came to Jesus, scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, here it is again, the scribes picking at Jesus. He probably just minded his own business, and they came all the way from Jerusalem. Jesus probably somewhere in Galilee. They came all the way to Jerusalem just to pick at him. Just to ask this question. Just to pick at him. Nothing better else to do. Just jealousy make people do a whole lot of stuff. It makes them. They could work wonders when they're jealous of you. They could go above and beyond when if they move by jealousy. But they can't go above and beyond if they move by doing righteousness before God, doing right in general. They can't go above and beyond doing that, but they go above and beyond doing some wickedness when they move by jealousy. It's incredible. This human creature is incredible. Well, I ain't lying. Verse 1 again. Then came to Jesus, scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, why do thy disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? They came all the way from Jerusalem just to ask him this question. I wonder why they came from Jerusalem. Did they give alms to people? Did they teach in the synagogue of the Jews? Did they bless people by teaching God's law? Did they make any friends on their way from Jerusalem? Did they do all that? They came all the way from Jerusalem just to ask this one question. That's a shame. I ain't lying. Verse 2. Why do thou disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. And see what Jesus is going to answer them. Verse 3. But he answered and said unto them, why do you also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? What did we read in 1 John, the 3rd chapter, verse 4? That sin is the transgression of the law. And Jesus said right here, why do you also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? So basically Jesus is saying, why do you sin by your tradition? Why do you sin against God by your traditions? Because sin is the transgression of God's commandments. Why do you also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? For God commanded, saying, honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth father or mother, let him die to death. But ye say, whosoever shall say to his father or his mother, it is a gift, that whatsoever thou might be profited by me. They saying right now, it is a Christmas gift, whatsoever thou might profit me. So we don't need to keep the Lord's Passover. It is a Christmas gift. That's what they saying. That's basically what they do. It is a Christmas gift. So we don't have to keep the Lord's Passover. Keeping Christmas is more jolly and more fun than that boring and simple thing of taking bread and wine on the Lord's Passover. We don't have to do that no more because we're doing something more jolly and more fun. It is a Christmas gift. This is basically the context that I'm saying that modern people do now that Jesus was saying about these Pharisees. It is a gift. So you better try to do something in some type of jolly spirit than keep God's commandments. Something simple. That's basically what Jesus is getting at here. Verse 5 again. But you say, whosoever shall say to his father or his mother, it is a gift, by whatsoever thou mightst be profited by it. Verse 6. And honor not his father or his mother, as God commanded, and honor not his father or his mother, he shall be free. Thus you have made the commandments of God of none effect by your traditions. So, brothers, this is what we learn here in verse 6. You can make the commandments of God of none effect by your traditions. And we read in verse 3, you transgress the commandment of God by your traditions. It means you sin against God by your traditions. How do you do that? By making God's commandments of none effect. So people who keep Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, St. Valentine's Day, Sunday, saying that's the Christian Saturday, all those people are making the commandments of God in Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, of none effect. That's where you sign out. That's where you read the Lord's feast days. That's where you read the Lord's feast days. Even the weekly Sabbath day is in the Leviticus 23rd chapter. Weekly Sabbath day, Passover, unleavened bread, the Feast of Weeks, which is also nicknamed the Pentecost, Day of Pentecost, Memorial of the Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, which will be important to you in this lesson, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. I hope I ain't missing nothing. Those are the feasts of the Lord. Those are what we should be keeping. But people who keep Christmas and Easter and etc. have made that of none effect. So that's a sin. They make the commandments of God none effect by their traditions. They sin by keeping traditions. And what did Jesus say about people who do that? Verse 7. Ye hypocrites, where did Isaiah prophesy of you sin? So, what do we learn here, brothers and sisters? Hypocrites and sinners are one and the same. People who do such things as transgress the commandment of God to keep man's traditions, who also make the commandments of God of none effect to keep man's traditions, are hypocrites. They are hypocrites. They are, and also are sinners, because again, verse 3, you also transgress the commandment of God, which is sin, by your traditions. Hypocrites and sinners are one and the same, they are synonymous. Verse 8, this people drive nigh unto me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Why is their heart far from him? Because they make his commandments of none effect. By their traditions about other stupid stuff they do. That's how their heart is far from him. So how can your heart be close to him? By you keeping his commandments. That's how your heart can be close to him. Keeping his commandments. And in the spirit, how your heart can be close to him, we'll start learning verse 9. What verse 9 say? But in vain they do worship me, teaching the doctrines and commandments of man. This is our second form of sin and our apprentice level form of sin. Worshiping, the sin of worshiping God in vain, from not worshiping God in good faith. This again, the second form of a hidden form of sin is worshiping God in vain, from not worshiping God, by not worshiping God in good faith. And I have a definition in front of me. The definition of good faith. It simply says honesty or sincerity of intention. That's the definition of good faith. Honesty or sincerity of intention. Brothers and sisters, we got to worship God in honesty and sincerity of intention. In good faith. With our hearts truly towards him. Not worship God where we make his commandments of none effect, showing our heart is not towards him. Now let's go through some scenarios where God can be worshipped in vain, which again is a form of sin. And remember, the wages of sin is death. The wages of transgressing God's law is death. But right now we're talking about the spirit law. We're talking about the spirit law. And I'm about to get into the spirit. Let's get into it. Matthew the 6th chapter. Go to Matthew the 6th chapter and we're going to start reading verse 1. Okay, I'm going to start reading. Take heed that you do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Brothers and sisters, take heed that you don't worship God to be seen of man. You worship God to be seen only of God. lest you have no reward of God. You get your reward from man. Again, the spirit of the law is to worship God, to be seen of God. Not to worship God to be seen of man. That don't even make sense. Why would you worship God just to be seen of man? That you worshiping God, that don't even make sense. You worship God to be seen of God so you can be rewarded by God. If you don't do that, he's not going to reward you, and we go read that. Verse 2. Therefore, when thou doest thy alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. Yeah, they have the reward of man, but now they have the reward of God. That's what they have the reward from. Verse 3. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know, but thy right hand doeth. Verse 4. That thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. God wants you to do your things in secret and in privacy. He don't want you to announce what you're doing. Your good deeds you do for him, he don't want it to be announced. He don't want you to be a show off. He just wants you to do good and do good before him, so he can reward you. It's vain to worship God by trying to be seen of men. That's vanity. That and it's also sin is going against the spirit of the law. The law, the letter of the law is the transgression. That sin is the transgression of the law. The spirit of the law is that sin is worshiping God in vain and not worshiping God in good faith. And worshiping God in good faith means to worship God only to be seen and rewarded of God. That's what worshiping God in good faith means. Worship God in good faith. That's the spirit of the law. Don't worship him in vain, looking to be seen of man, looking to keep the traditions of man over the commands of God. That's worshiping God in vain. That is sin. And remember, the wages of sin is death. And remember, you can sin through ignorance and bear your iniquity. You could be a curse. And when you're in the curse, you can cause people to die. And you go read next that somebody almost died themselves. And you can also be rejected by God when you sin. We're reading this hidden form of sin right now. Worshiping God in vain, trying to be seen of man. Verse 5. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are. There go that word hypocrites. And we know what hypocrites mean. It means sinners. It's synonymous with sinners. We learned that in Matthew 15th chapter. I believe it was verse 8. Verse 8 when Jesus said that. Verse 7 and 8. Ye hypocrites. Well did Isaiah the prophet saying. That's what he said, I believe, Matthew 15 and 7. Hypocrites and sinners are one and the same, brothers and sisters. So these people, they like to announce, Jesus said, do not sound a trumpet, who like to be seen of men are sinners. Hypocrites are synonymous with sinners. Verse 5 again, and when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are. Or you can say, when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the sinners are. For they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Not to be seen of God, but to be seen of man. Verily I say to you, they have their reward. Jesus said the second time. He said the second time because he's trying to confirm something to us. I'm going to teach you what that reward means in initiation. Man, that's some dangerous stuff to see. They have their reward. What he's saying, that's some dangerous stuff. I ain't lying. It's just not him being poetic right here. He's really saying something. He's really saying something deep. They have their reward. This is more than being poetic. I'm not playing. Verse 6 though. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and thou hast shut thy door, pray to the Father which is in secret, and thy Father which sitteth in secret shall reward thee openly. He said it again. Deal with God in secret. You don't deal. That don't mean you got to. You say you want to get a homeless person some money or some food. That you got to make sure ain't nobody looking at you. It don't mean all that. It just means you go do the deed and don't announce it. Look at me. Don't announce it verbally or metaphysical or in another way. Don't try to announce it that you're doing this good deed. Just go and do the deed. You read the Good Samaritan parable. The man who took the man he saw laying to death. He took him to a hotel and said, I'll pay for everything. When I return, I will pay for everything that you do unto this man. Now, that wasn't totally in secret that he was doing a good deed, because he had to bring him to the end and tell the people that he'll pay for it. So that was not in total secret. It's just that he didn't make no big announcement. He didn't go to his city like, I just did this for this man, this Samaritan man. I'm such a good man. I'm such a godly man. Look what I did. Now, if he had did that, then he's doing it to be seen of man, and his worship of God was in vain. But that he didn't do that in the parable. Again, brothers and sisters, let's worship God in good faith, in honesty and sincerity of intention. Let's worship God in that way. Now, let's go to 2 Kings, the 20th chapter. Let's go to 2 Kings, 20th chapter, and start to really get into this second form of sin, which is a hidden sin, worshiping God in vain. Let's really get into it. 2 Kings, the 20th chapter. We're going to start reading in verse 1. 2 Kings, the 20th chapter. We're going to start reading in verse 1. Okay, I'm going to start reading. In those days was Hezekiah sick unto death. He was sick unto death. And we read in Romans the 6th chapter, verse 23. And the wages of sin is death. I wondered what he did, but we'll get into that later. And the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amos, came to him and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, set thine house in order, for thou should die and not live. And when the prophet is sent unto God to tell you something, it's confirming what God will do to you. It's like it's written in stone. When a great, especially a prophet as great as Isaiah, come to you saying something like that, it's written in stone that you go die. And he said, for thou should die and not live. Now, what did Hezekiah do? And we're going to learn this lesson, what he finally do. Verse 2. Then he turned his face to the wall and prayed unto the Lord, saying, he turned his face to the wall. He didn't turn his face to the temple wall in front of the whole congregation. He didn't turn and stand on the corners of the street and pray unto God. No, brothers and sisters, he turned his face in privacy and in secret to the wall. He did it in privacy. Let's see what he's going to pray for and see if is he going to get what he prayed for. Verse 2 again, we'll continue to read. He turned his face to the wall and prayed unto the Lord, saying, I beseech thee, O Lord, remember now how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart. I have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. Again, he did this in privacy and in secret. He did this in privacy and secret. He didn't do this to be seen of man. He did this to be seen of God. Because he's looking for some type of reward of God. And God can reward better than man can. So it's foolishness to worship God, to be seen of man, and to get rewarded by man, because man can't reward you like God can reward you. Man can't reward you like God can reward you. That's why you need to worship God in good faith, because he can certainly reward. Let's see how he'll reward Hezekiah from doing this humble act. Finally, you know what I mean when I say finally. Verse 4. And it came to pass afore Isaiah was gone out into the middle court, that the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, Turn again and tell Hezekiah, the captain of my people, Thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer, I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will heal thee on the third day, and thou should go up to the house of God. And I will add unto thy days 15 years, and I will deliver thee and this city out of the hand of the king of Syria. And I will defend the city for my own sake and for my servant David's sake. So Hezekiah prayed to God in secret. And God, which Jesus said the Father can see in secret, saw in secret, and he added unto Hezekiah 15 years to his life. Remember, the prophet in verse 1 said that thou should die and not live, and this is a great prophet. That's why Hezekiah wept sore, because he know when Isaiah say something, it's going to come to pass. That was a great prophet. That's why he wept sore, because it was confirmed to God, you're going to die. But he worshiped God in the vein that God liked to be worshipped, in secret. And God don't like to be worshipped in vain, in front of man, in public. He added 15 years to Hezekiah's life. Can man do that, brothers and sisters? Can man reward you like that? When you're on your deathbed, add 15 years to your life? Can man do that? No man can't do that, so you shouldn't be trying to show off. Worship God to be seen of man then. To get rewarded by man, you should worship God to be only seen of God. So you can be rewarded by God with something like this. Add 15 years to your life. Some people will take 15 months. If they on their deathbed, 15 more months. He added 15 years. That's a lot, brothers and sisters. That's a lot to add to somebody who know they about to die. That's a long time. I ain't lying, that's a long time. Because Hezekiah did, because he pleased God when he worshiped God in secret. He worshiped God in good faith. It pleased God. He kept the spirit of the law. He kept the spirit of the law. Worshiping God in good faith. He kept the spirit of the law. Let's read verse 7. Let's end this and read verse 7. And Isaiah said, take a lump of figs. And they took and laid it on the boil, and he recovered. He recovered means Hezekiah recovered from his sickness. Now, let's go to Nehemiah, the 13th chapter. Go to Nehemiah, the 13th chapter. And we're going to start reading in verse 7. Go to Nehemiah, the 13th chapter, and we're going to start reading in verse 7. All right, now let's start reading. And I came to Jerusalem and understood the evil that Elisha did for Tobiah. Now, this is Nehemiah, who was a high official in the Persian court, but he was a Jewish man. He was an Israelite, and you know, you could read through the book of Nehemiah. He asked leave of the king to go come and take care of Jerusalem and his people in Israel that was in Jerusalem, and the king of Persia gave him leave to do so, made him the governor of this area, this, and gave him also other powers to take care and rebuild Jerusalem and the people that's in Judea and Judah at this time. Now, Nehemiah is doing all these reformations. We're going to read some of these reformations that Nehemiah is doing. The Bible study question is Nehemiah doing this to be seen of men? Is Nehemiah going to do all these reformations to be seen of the Persian king? Is he going to be doing this to be seen of Israel? Or is he going to be doing this to be seen of God? Let's read and see. Verse 7 again, we're going to continue to read. And I came to Jerusalem, and I understood of the evil that Elisha did for Tobiah, in preparing him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. And it grieved me sore, therefore I cast forth all the household stuff of Tobiah out of the chamber. Then I commanded, and they cleansed the chambers, and thither brought I again the vessels of the house of God, and the meat offered, and the frankincense. And I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them. But the Levites and the singers that did the work were fled everyone to his field. It got so bad that the Levites, who supposed to be living off the tithe of the people, because they was the ministers, people wasn't tithe, and they had to go to do work in the field. They had to look really, real bad. That's why Nehemiah did all the stuff. They had to really look bad. That the Levites had to work like common men. They had to work in the field. Not saying they superior man, but they are the ministers. They shouldn't have been doing it. The people should have been taking care of them with their tithes and donations. But all that's another lesson. Verse 11. Then contended I with the rulers and said, why is the house of God forsaken? And the ministers of God forsaken, obviously. Why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. Then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn and the new wine and the oil unto the treasuries. This Nehemiah was something, boy, I'm telling you. But we go read something. This Nehemiah was something. This was a great man. I ain't lying. He was a great man. But let's continue to read verse 12. Then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn, and the new wine, and the oil unto the treasuries. And I made treasures over the treasuries. Shelemiah the priest, and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites Padiah. And next to them was Hanan, the son of Zakku, the son of Mattaniah. For they were counted faithful, and their office was to distribute unto their brother. Now, again, the Bible study question is, why didn't Nehemiah do all this stuff, all this reformation? First, he cleaned out a chamber that somebody was using to sleep in, basically sleep in and sell stuff, I believe. He made sure the people started to give tithe again, that the Levites had to go out in the field and work like the common folk. Why did he do all this? Was he doing it to be seen of man, seen of the Persian king? Look, king, I asked you to give me leave to do this. Look at all the good work I'm doing. Did he do this to be seen of Israel? Look, Israel, I'm a holy man. I'm a godly man. Look what I'm doing for you. Or did he do this to be seen of God? Let's read it. Verse 14. Remember me, O my God, concerning this. Good for you, Nehemiah. He's doing this to be seen of God. All this stuff and other stuff you can read on your own. He's doing all this to be seen of God. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God and for the offices thereof. So, what did we learn here, brothers and sisters? First we learned Nehemiah did all this to be seen of God. And second, he asked God not to wipe out his good deeds that he have done for God. Which means what? God will wipe out the good deeds you do even for God. Why would God do that? Because you're not doing them for God. You're doing them to be seen of man. That's why he'll do it. That's what we learn in that verse. God will wipe out your good deeds because you're doing them to be seen of man. Didn't Jesus say they have their reward in Matthew the 6th chapter? They have the reward of man. That's what their reward is. But God wiped it out. Wherever God was going to get them, he wiped it out. They got the reward from man, not from God. Their good deeds was wiped out in front of him. As far as he's concerned, it is wiped out because they transgressed the spirit of the law. And the spirit of the law is to worship God in good faith, not worship God in vain. By making his commandments of none effect and making him of none effect. And making his commandments of none effect is making him of none effect. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God, for the offices thereof. Skip down to verse 22. And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves, and that they should come and keep the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. So he cleansed the Levites. He commanded the Levites, the ministers, to clean themselves. And we're going to show you who they had to clean themselves from. He commanded them to cleanse themselves and to keep the Sabbath day, basically keep the Sabbath day holy. And why did Nehemiah do this again? Let's read. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of thy mercy. Oh, this why Nehemiah did this. He keeps saying, remember me, O my God. Not remember me, O Israel. Remember me, O my God. Because he wants God to remember him. Why he want God to remember him? He's doing this for God, not no one else. He's doing this in worship of God. He's doing this in worship of good faith, with honesty and sincerity of intention. That's why Nehemiah is doing this. He's doing this to praise his God. This is why he's doing all this. He said, oh my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to that great mercy. So when you do things for God, he will spare you. That's what Nehemiah said. He will spare you according to his great mercy. Then we read in 2 Kings 20th chapter that he spared Hezekiah when Hezekiah prayed to the wall in privacy and secret. He spared his life, and not only did he spare his life, he added 15 years to his life. When you remember God, he will spare you from death. He will spare you from heartache. He will spare you from trials and tribulations that you can't handle. Now, I'm not saying he will spare you from trials and tribulations altogether, but he will spare you from something you can't handle. He definitely will do that. He will spare you, brothers and sisters. He will spare you when you remember him. And how do you remember him? You worship him that to be seen only of him. You don't worship God to be seen of man. That's the transgression of the spirit of the law. That's a transgression. That's sin. That's a hidden form of sin. Now, let's go to verse 30. Verse 30. Thus cleanse I them from all strangers. Oh, this is how Nehemiah cleansed the Levites from the strangers. But you have a foolish priest that I used to be under. I used to be under the tutelage of this man. But when I started to figure out he's foolish, now getting old in the word, you should be telling us that Israel is the reason why everybody in the world are evil. It's our fault. We read here that the Levites need to be cleansed from the stranger. But he make it so that Israel, the stranger, and the heathen need to be cleansed from Israel. That's how much of an idiot this man was. And what this man is, basically. But I get to Israel and the stranger and other lessons. Thus cleanse I them from all strangers, and appointed the wards of the priests and the Levites, everyone in his business. And for the wood offering at times appointed, and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. There it is the third time, brothers and sisters. Remember me, O my God. And he said here for good. So when you remember, you do things for God, to be seen of God, he's going to remember you for good. Brothers and sisters, this Nehemiah was a genius. Nehemiah was smart. I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, Nehemiah and Ezra are very underrated. When everybody talks about great man of Old Testament, never Nehemiah or Ezra are never mentioned. Everybody talks about Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, Solomon, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, so on and so forth. Everybody talk, and they should talk about it. But they were some great and righteous men, but so was Nehemiah and Ezra. These brothers were geniuses. And I'm gonna put Nehemiah and Ezra on the map in Masterclass too. I just joined Israel. Gonna put these two great men. They're gonna be put on the map because these men were geniuses. They were righteous and they were great reformers. They should get more credit than they do. We learned three things from this great man Nehemiah. When you worship God to be seen of God, he will not wipe away your good deeds. That's number one. Number two, he will spare you according to his great mercies. And number three, he will remember you for good. Nehemiah understood this, and that's what he's teaching us now, teaching us in later generations. This was a great man. I wish he would get more credit. That's what we learned, brothers and sisters, from this great man. Those three things. Now let's go and really see it. Let's go back to 2 Kings, the 20th chapter. Go back to 2 Kings, the 20th chapter, and we're going to start reading verse 12 this time. Now, let's ask ourselves another Bible study question in this Apprentice classroom. Why did God was finna take the life of Hezekiah in the first place? Why did God was going to do that in the first place? That is a billion-dollar question, isn't it? Then, not only was he going to do it, he confirmed to Hezekiah, I'm going to do this by sending his prophet. Thou should die and not live. That's what Isaiah said to him. Why was God going to do this in the first place? Verse 12, let's start finding it out. At that time, Berodach Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present unto Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. Until the Lord spared him after he showed some humility. Verse 13, and Hezekiah hearkened unto them, and showed them all the house of his precious things, the silver, and the gold, and the spices, and the precious ointment, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures. There was nothing in his house, nor in all his domain that Hezekiah showed them not. Hezekiah showed them all his riches, and the riches of his kingdom. Bad move, Hezekiah. Verse 14, then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah, like Then, like Isaiah came to Hezekiah to tell him, thou should die and not live. That Isaiah. Verse 14 again. Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah, saying to him, What said these men, and from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country, even from Babylon. Verse 15. And this is the key thing while we are here. He said, What have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All things that are in my house have they seen. There go that word seen again, which we first start reading about in Matthew the 6th chapter. Apparently, Hezekiah loved to be seen of men. And he liked to be seen as a man of men, as a rich and prosperous man. That's why he showed them all this stuff, all the silver, gold, spices, precious ointment. People from a far country, they not even close. Hezekiah was a show-off. He loved to be seen of men. And he loved to be seen as a rich and prosperous man. And we can deduct from that he loved to be seen as a godly man. Why can we deduct that? From all this, that he loved to be seen as a godly man? Because a godly man is nothing but a man who is spiritually rich. And Hezekiah obviously liked to be seen as a rich and prosperous man. In other words, he liked to worship God just to be seen of man. He liked to be the king of Israel just to be seen of man. He wasn't like Nehemiah. Remember me, oh my God. Except that one little time when his life was on the line. Then he got humble. Brothers and sisters, I hope you understand what you're reading here. What we are reading together here. God wiped away Hezekiah's good deeds that Hezekiah said he did. He said, I walk before thee in perfect heart and in truth. What's that? Verse 4. Verse 3. 2 Kings 23. I walk before thee in truth and with a perfect heart. I have done that which is in good in thy sight. But you did it, Hezekiah, to be seen of man. Hezekiah said he did that. But he did it to be seen of man, because we see here he loved to be seen as a rich and prosperous man, which also includes a godly man who is nothing but a man who is spiritually rich. Hezekiah transgressed the spirit of the law. And what did we read in Romans the 6th chapter, brothers and sisters? The wages of sin is death. The wages of transgressing God's law is death. Even the wages of transgressing the spirit of God's law is death. That's why Hezekiah was about to die, because God wiped away his good deeds, because they wasn't deeds done for God. They wasn't deeds done to be seen of God like the deeds of Nehemiah. They was deeds to be seen of man. Now, I'm not saying every single thing he did was to be seen of man, but he had a spiritual blemish. That is obvious here in verse 13. He loved to show off that he was rich and prosperous. He liked to be a show-off. He wasn't humble, but had that little humble moment, and God blessed him from being humble finally. That's why I said finally. He finally showed some humility and prayed to the wall instead of praying to the temple wall, which God probably expected him to do in front of the congregation. But he finally prayed, and God added back to the years of his life. And that seems to me those 15 years was actually the years of his life. God took away 15 years out of his life. So when they say he added unto 15 years, he really gave back to him what God had already planned for him, how long God planned for him to live. He gave him his years back. So, brothers, what does that learn? What do we learn from that? Remember, Nehemiah said, remember me, oh my God, for good. And God will remember you for good when you remember him and worship him for only him. And not to be seen of man. Hezekiah did not do that. He did foolishness. He had a spiritual blemish to be a show off. Now, He was spared because his impromptu moment of humility, but someone else is not going to be spared because he didn't learn the lesson. Brothers and sisters, Hezekiah did not learn the lesson. To worship, not to be seen of man, not to worship God in vain. He did not learn that lesson. Let's start back at verse 14, continue to read. Then came Isaiah the prophet to King Hezekiah, and said unto him, What said these men, and from whence came they unto thee? Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country, even from Babylon. And he said, What have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All things that are in my house have they seen. And that was the big problem, Hezekiah. You should never did that. You should have learned your lesson. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not shown them. And Isaiah said unto Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the days come that all that is in thine house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day should be carried unto Babylon. Nothing should be left, saith the Lord. And of thy sons thou shalt issue from thee, which thou should begat, should they take away, and they should be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. So what do we read here, brothers and sisters? No, Hezekiah was spared. His descendants are not going to be spared from his foolishness of worshiping God in vain to be seen of man, instead of worshiping God in good faith to be seen only of God. From him transgressing the spirit of the law. He was spared because he wasn't about to be spared, but he showed that impromptu humility, like King Ahab showed some humility. And you can read, I think that's in 2 Kings somewhere too. And God spared him a few years and said he's going to destroy his descendants. Same thing with Hezekiah. God said, okay, you show some humility. I'm not going to destroy you, but because God's not an Indian giver. So he decided to destroy Hezekiah's male descendants, probably his female descendants as well. Verse 18, if thy son thou should issue from thee, which thou should begat, should they take away, they should be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then said Hezekiah unto Isaiah, Good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken. He said, It is not good if peace and truth be in my days. Hezekiah finally was humble at their sentence to him. He was kind of relieved that it wasn't going to happen in his day. That he's going to, because he showed that moment of humility. If he continued to do it, his descendants probably would have been spared. And what does that teach us, brothers and sisters? That even if we are spared, but if we continue in the same foolishness, our descendants will not be spared. We need to be responsible not only for our life, but our lives of our descendants. Do not worship God in vain, looking to be seen of man. Worship God to be seen of God, because God can reward better than man. Man cannot add 15 years to your life or give you your 15 years back like God did Hezekiah. Let's worship God in good faith. Let's do that. Now, let's read all this again. Let's go to Matthew the 7th chapter. We're going to start reading in verse 21. Go to Matthew the 7th chapter, and we're going to start reading in verse 21. We're learning some good stuff, ain't we, brothers and sisters? Because this is the Apprentice classroom right now. We are learning some good stuff. We are learning hidden forms of sin. Right now, we are focused on the spirit of the law. And the spirit of the law is to worship God in good faith, which means to be seen of God. What you do for God, the deeds you do for God, you do it only to be seen of God, not no one else. If you do it to be seen, you worship God and you do good deeds, supposedly for God, but to be seen of other people, you are worshiping him in vain, and he will not spare you. He will wipe away your good deeds. And right now, we're going to remember, he will not remember you for good, as we about to read right now. Let's start reading. Verse 21, Matthew 7:21. Now, this is Jesus talking here. Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. So Jesus saying here, not everyone who, as he said in Matthew 15 chapter, honors me with their mouth, but their heart's far from me. When we read that in Matthew the 15th chapter, was that verse 7 or 8? These are the same kind of people who saying, Lord, Lord. They honor God with their mouth, but their hearts far from him. They don't do the will of the Father. What does it mean to do the will of the Father and your heart be close to God? You keep his commandments. That's what it means. The letter of the law and the spirit of the law. So we're going over now in this apprentice class. That's what it means. That's the will of the Father. And you do it in secret. Remember, we read Matthew the 16th chapter. The Father wants you to, the Father says in secret, shall reward you openly. Make your prayers in secret. And the Father who says in secret shall reward you openly. He wants you to worship him in secret. Which means, brothers and sisters, again, to worship him, to be seen of him. It don't mean you got to do everything literally in the closet. Sometimes you do, like Hezekiah did. He prayed to the wall. Sometimes you might do it. You might got to do that because you was doing too much worshiping God, being seen of man, like Hezekiah was doing. That's why he had to do that. He finally had to do that. And he finally did it. But he ended up going back to his old ways, as we already just read. Now let's read this. Now let's go back to him. Verse 21 again. Not everyone that said unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. And we know what the will of the Father is. Verse 22. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in that name have cast out devils, and in that name done many wonderful works. Now this is Judgment Day right here, basically, that Jesus is giving us a picture of. And you notice that these people are not saying, have we not kept your commandments? No one is saying that. Have we not give glory to thy name? They said we prophesy in thy name, and that name have cast out devils, and that name done wonderful works. Of course you done it in his name. The name is that powerful. You can do it. You can do all that. You can use the name of Jesus and cast out devils, prophesy, and do many wonderful works. But why are you doing it? Apparently, these people were doing it to be seen of men. They wasn't doing it like Nehemiah was doing in Nehemiah 13th chapter. To be seen of God. Remember me, oh my God. Remember Nehemiah said that? So basically, brothers and sisters, what are we getting at? These people was using the name of God to make a name for themselves. They were not using the name of God to make a good name for God, which you're supposed to be using the name of God for. But then again, the name is so powerful, you can still do powerful stuff with it. Even if you worship God in vain, you still can do some powerful stuff, but the name is that powerful. The name of Jesus is that powerful. But why are you using the name, though? Are you using the name to make a name for yourself? Are you using the name of Jesus to make a good name for yourself, or are you using it to make a good name for God? Let's see what Jesus decided about these people. Verse 23. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you that work iniquity. Brothers and sisters, then we read in Leviticus the 5th chapter, he which is not yet guilty and should bear his iniquity. Then we read that in Leviticus the 5th chapter. These people sin through ignorance. They sin they sin through the spirit of the law by worshiping God in vain and not worshiping God in good faith, which means, and what we learn in here, that you use the name of God to give a good name to God. You don't use the name of God to make a name for yourself. That's what we learn in here in these three little verses right here. That's what these people did. And again, they said, have we not prophesied in thy name? They did not say, have we not keep thy commandments? That's what they should have said. But they didn't say that, did they? They did not keep the spirit of the law. And since they didn't say what I just said, they did not keep the technical part of the law. That's why Jesus said, depart from me, you that work iniquity. And they probably didn't know they was doing this much sinning against God. They was doing it in ignorance. But again, you can bear iniquity. You can bear iniquity even when you sin in ignorance. As we read in Leviticus 5th chapter. And we read in 1 Samuel the 15th chapter, if you reject the word of the Lord going to reject you, like he rejected Saul. And that's what he's doing here in verse 23. He rejected these people. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you that work iniquity. God saying, depart from me is God's rejecting. Why did God reject these people? Because they did not keep his commandments. They did not keep the letter of the law, nor did they keep the spirit of the law. That's why he rejected them. It's like he rejected Saul. And he didn't remember them for good. Like Nehemiah was asking God to remember him for good. For the good deeds that Nehemiah was doing to be seen of God. God did not remember them for good. That's why I say Nehemiah was brilliant, man. He understood his God. He really understood his God. Him and Ezra, they really understood God. They need to get more credit. Those brothers need to get more credit. And I'm proud to call them my brothers. They need to get more credit. Because they really understood God and his wishes, and they executed. Now, let's go to Revelation's 22nd chapter. Let's answer in two ways why these people, we should already know, I already said it, but I'm going to read it to you. Let's answer again in two ways why these people right here in Matthew 7:23 were rejected by Jesus. When he said, depart from me, you that work iniquity. Why were they rejected? Why did they bear iniquity? Let's read it. We'll give you two answers. We should already know both answers. Should already know both answers already. Let me give you the first answer. Revelation 22, we're going to start reading in verse 14. Revelation 22 and verse 14. Okay, I'm now going to start reading. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter into the gates of the city. Then we just read, brothers and sisters, Matthew the 7th chapter, verse 21, that everyone who say, Lord, Lord, should not enter into the kingdom of heaven. And by the way, the kingdom of heaven is going to be on the earth. Just so you know. But then we just read that in Matthew 7:21. Everyone that says, Lord, Lord, should not enter the kingdom of heaven. Why did all these people who are saying, Lord, Lord, not going to enter the kingdom of heaven? Because they're not keeping God's commandments. That they may have right to the tree of life. And they may enter through the gates into the city. That's why they not go enter the kingdom of heaven, because they're not keeping his commandments. They're not keeping the letter of the law. That's why Jesus said in Matthew 7:23, depart from me, workers of iniquity. What iniquity was they working? Transgression God's commandments. That was the iniquity they was working. That's the first answer. They transgressed the letter of the law. That was the first answer. Let's see the second answer. Let's go to Malachi the 3rd chapter. Let's read the second answer they did. That's the first answer. They was transgressing the letter of the law, which made them work iniquity. And they did it ignorantly. But God said, he wished it not, yet he's still guilty and should bear his iniquity. And he said later in that chapter, certainly he has trespassed against the Lord. Certainly. Even though he did it in ignorance, he still trespassed. God only sees sin. He don't see if it's done in ignorance or if it's done willfully. He just sees sin. I ain't lying, he only sees sin. He only sees sin. I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, this is the God we are dealing with. So we need to find out about this God. We really need to give some deep Bible study and give our lives to learn about this God to save our souls, because he is not playing. He don't play. That's why Nehemiah did all that stuff and said, remember me, oh my God, because he understood, like Daniel say, this great and dreadful God. And then they say that in Daniel the 9th chapter, I think he said that, yeah. Great and dreadful God. That's what Daniel called God when he's praying to him. Great and dreadful. Not sweet and cuddly Jesus. Our God is great and dreadful. He wished it not, yet he's guilty and should bear his iniquity. That's dreadful. And he certainly has trespassed against the Lord. That's dreadful, brothers and sisters. To understand that you can sin in ignorance and God will bear iniquity upon you. God will curse you. God will reject you. God will not remember you for good. God will wipe away your good deeds. God will not spare you. That is dreadful. That is not cuddly. Our God is dreadful. We need to learn his commandments and keep them. We need to even learn these hidden forms of sin that I'm teaching you now. We need to learn it. Malachi the 3rd chapter, we're going to start reading verse 16. Malachi 3 and 16, I'm there, let's start reading. Then they that feared the Lord spake often one to another. They that feared the Lord, not they that feared man. Not they that obeyed man like Saul did. It say, like Saul did in 1 Samuel 15 chapter, it say, then they that feared the Lord spake often one to another. What did they speak to each other? Let's continue to read. And the Lord hearkened and heard it. And a book of remembrance was written before him for them that feared the Lord and that thought upon his name. And they should be mine, saith the Lord of hosts. In the day when I make up my Jews, and I will spare them as a man spareth his son that serveth him. So these people who spake of God and thought upon his name, they are going to be spared. Then we read in Nehemiah 13th chapter, I believe it's in verse 22, when Nehemiah said, remember me, O my God, and spare me according to thy great mercies. Then we read there, brothers and sisters. But why will God spare you according to his great mercies? Because you remember to worship him, to just be seen of him. That's why he remembered. And that's what these people are doing right here. Now, these people are not speaking in secret. They're speaking to each other about God. But why are they doing it? They're speaking about God. They're speaking about the name of God for the good name of God. They're not speaking of the name of God to make a name of them for themselves, like those people did in Matthew the 7th chapter. They're not doing this for themselves. They're doing this for to make a good name for God, not to make a good name for themselves. That's why they're using the name of God here. They just witnessing, just talking about it. Honor him with their lips, but their heart is close to him because they obviously are keeping his commandments. Their heart is close to him because they are keeping his commandments. Unlike those people in Matthew the 15th chapter, who Jesus said, they honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Not these people in Malachi here. They honor God with their lips, but their heart is towards him because they obviously are keeping his commandments, as we read. And this is our second answer, brothers and sisters. This is the spirit of the law. This is why Jesus told those people in Matthew 7:23, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. Because they will not keep the spirit of the law. They're doing all that stuff they said. Have we not prophesied in thy name? Have we not done all these wonderful works in thy name? Have we not cast out devils in thy name? They were doing all that to make a name for themselves. They wasn't doing it to make a good name for God. That's why God did not spare them. He didn't spare them from the lake of fire. That's why God didn't remember them for good, as they was begging God to do. They made a petition for their life just like Hezekiah did. But God spared Hezekiah. He did not spare those people in Matthew the 7th chapter. He didn't spare them, though they made a petition. So Hezekiah was keeping. So that tells me that Hezekiah was keeping the letter of the law. That was separated him from these people. He just wasn't keeping the spirit of the law. So keeping the letter of the law would spare your life, even if you show some humility. If you finally show some humility in the spirit, that would spare your life. But those people were not keeping the letter of the law. You got to do both. You got to keep the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And I get into that in Master Class 1. Now, where we at? Now, brothers and sisters, that's the end of the apprentice classroom. We're about to embark on the master classroom. Our second form of sin, which we just talked about in the apprentice class, is worshiping God in vain to get glory for yourself, and not worshiping God in good faith to give glory unto God. That's our second form of sin, worshiping God in vain and not worshiping Him in good faith. Let's go to start learning about our third form of sin. This is the master class. Let's go to Romans the 5th chapter. Let's go to Romans the 5th chapter, and we're going to start reading in verse 12. Romans the 5th chapter, and we're going to start reading at verse 12. Okay, I'm there. Let's start reading. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, Now, brothers and sisters, let's say here, wherefore as one man sins into the world. I totally dispute this statement because it was about one woman that sinned into the world. It was about one woman, Eve, that sinned into the world into the world. And I'm going to read that to you exactly, without a shadow of a doubt, that it was about one woman, Eve, that sinned into the world. I'm going to read that to you in the Apprentice classroom, in one of the lessons in the Apprentice classroom. I'm going to prove it was Eve, not Adam. Everybody is blaming Adam. It was Eve who did this. Even Paul blamed Adam, but it was Eve. I'm going to prove that. It was about one woman, Eve, not one man, Adam. Read this 12 again, keep on reading. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, remember, we read in Romans the 6th chapter, that the wages of sin is death. Or you can say the wages of transgressing God's law is death. And death by sin. And so death passed upon all men, that all have sinned. For unto the law, sin was in the world. And it's what we hear. But this last part of verse 13, this is why we hear. But sin is not imputed when there is no law. Sin is not imputed when there is no law. What does that mean, brothers and sisters? You cannot have sin without also speaking of also God's law. You can't have sin without also the transgression of God's law. They go hand in hand. If you get rid of sin, you have to get rid of God's law. People getting rid of God's law just to get rid of sin. That sounds familiar. We'll get into that in another lesson. But again, you cannot speak of sin without also speaking of God's law. And you cannot speak of sin without also speaking of the transgression of God's law. Sin and God's law go hand in hand. They are a package deal. You can't have one without the other, brothers and sisters. Sin is not imputed when there is no law. And let's even go more concise to this statement. Sin is not imputed. Brothers and sisters, that's a statement I definitely agree with. That is a big statement said by Paul here. Sin is not imputed. You cannot impute sin without law, without God's law. You can't say someone is a sinner without God's law. And that's where we go concentrate here in this master class. Sin is not imputed when there is no law. We go find out, brothers and sisters, here. Let's start finding out that you can't impute sin without God's law. And if you do that, you are an accuser. You are an accuser if you start imputing sin without God's law. Let's start getting into that and start reading it. Let's go to John the 5th chapter. Go to John the 5th chapter. We're going to start reading at verse 45. You need law so sin can be imputed. That's why God created God's law in the first place. So sin can be imputed and not an accusation be imputed. That's why God had Moses write all those laws that we can read in the first 5 books of Moses. So sin can be imputed. Because there is no law, sin cannot be imputed. Only an accusation can be imputed. That's what we're about to get into in this master class. John the 5th chapter. And we're going to start reading at verse 45. John the 5th chapter, and we're going to start reading at verse 45. Okay, now let's start reading. Do not, this is Jesus talking now. And of course, he's talking to these Pharisees who are so jealous of him. Verse 45. Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There's one that accuses you, even Moses, in whom ye trust. For had you believed Moses, ye will have believed me, for he wrote of me. But if ye believe not his writings, how should you believe my words? Now, brothers and sisters, let's go over what we just read. Jesus Christ said in verse 45, do not think I will accuse you to the Father. There's one that accuses you, even Moses. So that don't sound right, because we could read in Hebrews the 3rd chapter that this man Jesus should be accounted worthy of more glory than Moses. But yet Jesus forbid himself from accusing people. And he said that Moses accused them. Why did he say that? Because he's not saying it to say that Moses is greater than him. He is saying what came with Moses does the accusations, so he don't have to. And what came with Moses is the law, God's law. That's what came with Moses. That is what is doing the accusation. That is what imputes sin. Remember, just read Romans 5th chapter. Sin is not imputed when there is no law, but sin is imputed when there is a law. It takes law to impute sin, not an accuser, not an accusation. It must be law. And even Jesus Christ said he is not an accuser. Moses does accusations, which means Moses' writings does accusations. If you read here, verse 47, if you believe not his writings, how should you believe my word? We're talking about Moses' writings. That's what's going to do the accusation. That is what imputes sin. Then we read in beginner's Bible study classroom that sin is the transgression of the law. Where is the law written at? It's written in Moses' writings. Sin is the transgression of the law, and you cannot impute sin when there is no law. Now, let's skip up to John 5 and 22 and read that one verse. John 5 and 22. For the Father judges no man, but hath committed all judgment to the Son. So we learn here that God the Father does no judging. He hath committed all judgment to the Son. And what did the Son of God say in John 5 and 45? Do not think I will accuse you to the Father. There's one that accuses you, even Moses. That's how the Son of God is going to judge, by the writings of Moses. And the writings of Moses and what does the writing of Moses contain? God's law. That's how Jesus is going to judge. And we're going to read that. But now let's confirm that Jesus is going to do the judgment. Let's go to 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter. Go to 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter, and we're going to start reading in verse 10. Go to 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter, and we're going to start reading in verse 10. Okay, now let's start reading. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. And Paul made that clear. All, good and evil. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. Not the judgment seat of God the Father. We appear before the judgment seat of Christ because Christ is going to do the judgment. God the Father, is not going to judge. Jesus Christ is going to do the judgment in Judgment Day. But he is going to judge us to God the Father. And he told us in John the 5th chapter how he's going to do it. By Moses' writings. He said, I will not accuse you to the Father, but if you have one that accuses you, even Moses. And he's speaking of what was written in Moses' writings, and that is God's law. That is going to do the judgment. That is going to impute sin, and that is going to get people, beings, thrown in the lake of fire. The writings of Moses. And we're going to read that. But the thing is, Jesus is the one doing the judgment. And he told us how he's going to judge. Let's finish this verse. Verse 10. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that he have done, whether it be good or bad. We must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, because Christ is going to do the judgment. Now, we are ready to read. We are ready to go to Revelation 20th chapter for the big ball game and learn the third form of sin and the masterclass form of sin. We're about to learn that now. Go to Revelation the 20th chapter, and we're going to start reading in verse 11. Go to Revelation the 20th chapter, and we're going to start reading in verse 11. All right, I'm there. Let's start reading. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, whose face the earth and heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. Now, John says he saw a great white throne. This throne is a throne of judgment. That's what he's looking at. Verse 12. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God. Brothers and sisters, then we just read in 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter, verse 10, that we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. We must all, and we read here in verse 12, and I saw the dead, small and great, which means all or everybody stand before God. So what are we reading? That Jesus Christ is God. There's no disputing that. We just broke it down to you. He's the one doing the judgment. We're reading right here, the judge, and the judge is called God. Jesus Christ is God. We just broke that down to you. Verse 12 again. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were open. And another book was open, which is the book of life. And that the book of life is the same book of remembrance we just read in Malachi, the 3rd chapter. I forgot to mention it. That was the book of life. And those people who spoke about God's name and thought upon his name in their own privacy of their heart and spoke to each other about God, making a good name for God instead of doing it to make a name for themselves, the name was entered into the book of life. That's one of the ways you enter the book of life, by keeping the spirit of the law and with long keeping the letter of the law. That's how you enter in this book. Let's start the second part of verse 12 again. And the books were open. And another book was open, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. Let's read that over, brothers and sisters, so a light bulb can pop on in your head. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books. Now, brothers and sisters, let's ask ourselves a Bible study question. Why does God, the Most High God, need books to judge anyone in the first place? Why does he, out of all beings, need books to judge? Why he can't just judge by looking at somebody and seeing what they got to say? Why do he need a book to judge? Because he's not an accuser. That's why, brothers and sisters. He's not an accuser. Then we read in John the 5th chapter that Jesus said, I will not accuse you to the Father. There's one that accused you, even Moses. Why did he say that? Because God is not an accuser. And we read Romans the 5th chapter. Sin is not imputed when there is no law. It's the God's law that imputes sin, not God, not technically God himself. He's indirectly imputing sin because God's law, of course, contains his own words and his own thoughts concerning what needs to be done, according to what he wants to be done. So he's not limiting his power because he got to have books in his hands to judge. It's just he's going through this procedure to show his creatures that he's about who he's going to throw in the lake of fire, that he's not an accuser. He's not an accuser. The law accuses them. The law imputes sin to them. God is not an accuser. And not only he's doing it to his creature, he's doing it to God the Father. Because God the Father trusts the God of his creation, who is Jesus Christ, to judge right. And Jesus Christ, the God of his creation, always judges right because he judges by the right procedure with books in his hands that contains the laws of God to judge his creatures. This takes us to our third form of sin, our masterclass form of sin, and that is being an accuser by imputing sin against another creature without books in your hands that contain the laws of God, especially when the creature's life or livelihood is on the line. You must have books in your hands that contain the laws of God in order to impute sin to another creature. If you don't have books in your hands that contain that contains the laws of God. And you're about to impute sin to another creature, especially when their life or livelihood is on the line. That makes you an accuser. And make what you're doing an accusation, not a judgment. It's an accusation. Brothers and sisters, this is the masterclass level to sin. And this is some deep stuff. It says again in the book, and the dead were judged out of those things which were written in those books. And I'm gonna say something according to that vein, that the living should be judged out of those things which were written in the books. And remember, Jesus said in John the 5th chapter that Moses does the accusation. So what is these books right here in Revelation 20 chapter? These are the books of Moses. Which means what, brothers and sisters? We better find out what Moses wrote and start keeping it. Because that's how we go be judged. We just broke that down. This ain't no denying. These are the books of Moses that these books are. Which were, and the dead were judged out of those things that were written in the books. These are the books of Moses. There's no doubt that I just broke that down to you. These are the writings of Moses. These books. Based on what Jesus said in John the 5th chapter. And we read in John 5:22 that he go do the judgment, and he told us how he go judge. In John 5:45, he told us how he go judge. Even Moses go accuse you. And we know, based on what we read in Romans the 5th chapter, that sin is not imputed when there's no law. You can only impute sin when there's a law. And the procedure that God is going to do at judgment is have books in his hands that contain his words and his law. And read it to you and see that you do it or do it not. And that's how he's going to judge, because he's not an accuser. That's why he's going through this procedure. It's not that he's limited in his power, because again, these words has his own, the words in these books is his own words. His own thoughts on what is right to him. And what should be done according to how he wants things, according to how he created things. So his creation. Those are his words that he's going to read to beings and creatures. Those are his words. But again, he's going through this procedure because he's not an accuser. He wants to show his creatures he's not an accuser before he throw them in the lake of fire. He won't show God the Father he's not an accuser. So, brothers and sisters, what does that mean to us? What does it mean to us? You and I cannot impute sin to no one without books in our hands that contains the laws of God, especially if their life and their livelihood is on the line. If we do that, we are accusers, and we have sinned against God. That is sin. You must, if you're going to impute sin to someone, you must have a book or some books in your hand that contains the laws of God. If you don't, you are a sinner, because you impute sin without books in your hand that contains the laws of God. That's up. This is some deep stuff. I know we learned. This is master class learning, brothers and sisters. This is the master class. Now, let's finish this. We'll start verse 12 again, and we will continue to read. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were open, and another book was open, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books, according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead, which were in it, and the death and hell delivered up the dead, which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. And how was every man judged? According to the writings of Moses, which contain God's law. And again, not only the dead should be judged this way at Judgment Day, but right now the living should be judged this way. If you're going to impute sin to someone, especially when their life and their livelihood is on the line, you must have books in your hand that contains the laws of God in order to do that. And if you do that, and if you don't do that, you're making yourself more than not only a God, you're making yourself more than God. Because God won't even do that. God will have books in his hands before he judges anyone to die. He will have a book in his hand. because he's not an accuser. So an accuser, whether evil angel or evil person, is a person or a creature who's making themselves a God, and not only that, they're making themselves more than God because they're going through a procedure that God won't even do. God will, versus, you understand what I'm saying? God won't even do this. He won't even accuse you without a book in his hand that has his law. So if anybody is accusing anybody else without a book in their hand that contains God's law, they are making themselves more than God. Do you guys understand that point? I hope you do. Now let's look at a being. Well, we're gonna look at a being who made himself more than God. I think you guys know what being I'm talking about. But let's read one thing real quick before we get there. Let's go to Job, the 4th chapter. Go to Job, the 4th chapter. And we're going to start reading at verse 17. Job, the 4th chapter, and we're going to start reading at verse 17. All right, I'm there. Let's start reading. Shall a mortal man be more just than God? Shall a man be more than his maker? We're going to also find out, should a immortal angel be more just than God? Should an immortal angel be more pure than his maker? Not only man, but the angels too. Verse 18, behold, he put no trust in his servants and his angels he charged with folly. So God charged his angels with folly. This don't really mean, I don't believe it really means sin, as we know it, transgressing God's law, but it means what it means, folly. He charged them with folly, probably based on a book that contains his words. That's how he charged them, because he's not an accuser. But we're going to read something. Well, some other being charged God's angels with folly as if he was God. Let's go read it. Revelation to 12th chapter. Revelation to 12th chapter. We're going to start reading at verse 7. Go to Revelation the 12th chapter and we're going to start reading at verse 7. Okay, I'm there. Let's start reading. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. The dragon is Satan. Verse 8, and prevailed not. Meaning Satan and his angels did not prevail against Michael and his angels. And prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out. That old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. This is now basically verse 9 is saying all Satan's names. The great dragon, the old serpent, which is the serpent in Genesis, the 3rd chapter. And he called a serpent. It doesn't mean he was actually a snake on his belly that went up to Eve. He's a 4-headed cherub angel. He did not appear to her as a snake on his belly. We'll get into that in another lesson though. And verse 9, and the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent that called the devil, and called serpent, of course, called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Now, let's read while we're here, brothers and sisters. Verse 10. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before God day and night. Brothers and sisters, I hope you understand what you read. That last part of verse 10 again, let's read it. For the accuser of our brother is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. Then we read again, brothers and sisters, John the 5th chapter that Jesus said, I will not accuse you before the Father, but you have one that accused you even most. But we read here that Satan accused God's angels before God, which means what? Then we read in Job the 4th chapter, that God charges angels with folly. We read right here that Satan charges God's angels with folly too, as if he was God or something. And he accused them like he was more than God. He didn't have no books in his hands. What he doing accusing God's angels, he don't have no books in his hand that contains the laws of God. Then it say he did it before God day and night, which accused him before our God day and night. This means Satan did this all the time. His name was Lucifer. He did this all the time. Charged God's angels with folly like he was God. And accused them without a book in his hand that contains the laws of God. Man, I hope you guys understand what you are reading here. This is some good stuff. This is one of the most important verses in the Bible. And let me tell you right, let me give you a hypothetical situation. And from here, we're going to go into the initiation classroom. Let me give you, if I was one of those angels that Satan accused, for whatever reason, this is what I would have said. I would have said, Lucifer, you saying I did this, where's the book in your hand? Where the book's at? What is the book in your hand that contains the laws of our God? Because you need to open those books if you go impute sin unto me. Because if you don't, you're an accuser. Where is the books at? Say, Lucifer, where is the books at? Then I will look over to God and did my role as a servant creature and said unto him, my Lord, most gracious and merciful God, for giving us life and being. Do you see what Lucifer is doing? He's making himself more than you, the Most High God. Our God see this blasphemy that this angel is doing. That's all I'm going to say. And the spotlight would have been on Lucifer that he loved so much, but it would have been a spotlight of blasphemy on him. A big spotlight of blasphemy. Hey, you like the spotlight? Now you can have the spotlight of blasphemy. And what do you think God would have done, brothers and sisters, after I would have said all that? He would have not done anything fantastic. He would have opened up a book and read it to Lucifer and said, you are blasphemous, and ordained some kind of judgment against him. Probably cast him to the earth like he did. That's what he would have done. He would have did something simple. Because God is not an accuser. He definitely does not go sit here and listen to a created being like me, the hypothetical angel, without me saying something that he has already written down or had a prophet write down on his behalf. I must have been saying something to him for him to hearken to me like that. And believe me, he would have hearkened because I said what he said and what he said he had written. That's what would have happened. But check this out, brothers and sisters. This is where the initiation comes in. The angels said here, for the accuser of our brother is cast down, which accused him before our God day and night. They didn't understand Satan was making himself more than God when he was accusing them. They didn't understand that. They actually did not understand that. He didn't have no books in his hands when he's done his accusation. They did not understand that, brothers and sisters. That is a mystery. Until I explain what I'm about to explain, there's no mystery no more, but according to what I'm about to explain. They did not understand that he was making himself more than God. They did not see it. But someone saw it. And you know who saw it? God saw it. God certainly saw it, and he saw it right away. But the thing is, he let it continue on. And let me tell you why he let it continue on. He had to think to himself. Now I know he thought to himself, this is a wonderful opportunity. None of my angels who I charged with folly, and this is one of the follies, this is why I charged them with folly, because they can't even see this. I want to see who's going to follow this blasphemous angel when he began to accuse me. And that's bingo, brothers and sisters. Because anyone or any being like Lucifer, who is Satan and that old serpent and that great dragon, and he also called the devil, anyone like Lucifer who accuses God's creatures without books in his hands that contains the laws of God, it only will be a matter of time before he starts accusing God and imputing sin to God. It's only a matter of time before he does that. And God knew that. It was only a matter since Satan was accusing all these angels, making himself more than God, not going through the right procedure of imputing sin with a book in your hand that contains the laws of God. He was not going through the right procedure. There is only a matter of time before he comes to God with that nonsense and start accusing God with these angels. To start accusing God to these angels and imputing sin to God, which of course he eventually did. It's called rebellion. But again, God knew that was going to happen. And he continued to let it. He started blaspheming his angel, and he continued to let it go on. And why did he let it go on? Brother and sister, it comes down to farming. Let the wheat grow with the tares. I mean, I got to tell you that initiation though. But it comes down to farming. He saw it. He saw this blasphemous angel, and he know where he was going with the accusation. He's going to come at him eventually. And he wanted to see how many angels go follow this blasphemous angel in his blasphemy. And he eventually found out 1/3 of them did. This tells us three things, brothers. This tells us some things, brothers and sisters, about our God and what happened in heaven. Number one, God does not have no fear at all. I mean, he has no fear. He knows this angel was going to come at him with accusations and blasphemy and say it to his angels, and he was going to persuade some of them to do the same to him. He knew that and didn't care. He just wanted to see what was going to happen. He wasn't scared that it was going to happen. He just wanted to see. It had to be a wonderful opportunity to separate the wheat from the tares. It had to be a wonderful opportunity. He was probably smiling about it. The only thing he probably hated about it is going to take away peace. I definitely know God the Father hated that. It's going to take away the peace in heaven for a little while until this process goes on. I know God the Father was going to hate that. It's like when you go to the gym, you start out a workout program, you probably hate working out, you probably hate dieting, but you're going to love the results if you continue on doing it. The same thing here. God probably is going to hate that lack of peace in the meanwhile, but he will love the results, separating the wheat from the tares. He's going to love the results. Remember, he already charged them with folly. We read in Job 4:18. And you see this blasphemous angel charging them with folly too, like he God or something. Wonderful opportunity. Number two, brothers and sisters, don't you know that the same angels that Satan was accusing to God about followed Satan? Do you really believe it was that perfect that the angels that Satan was accusing God, was accusing before God, was none of the angels that follow him? It was not that perfect, brothers and sisters. Some of the angels that Satan was accusing before God actually followed him when Satan started accusing God. That shows you how dumb and stupid these evil angels are. At least some of them. They followed Satan to be cursed into the lake of fire after he accused them before God. Believe me, it had to be at least one now. Not a third of an innumerable amount of angels. He at least accused one angel before God, and that same angel eventually followed him to go against God, which was so dumb. I'm telling you, I'm going to show you in initiation how dumb some of these evil spirits are. I mean, they are really dumb. And I'm just pointing out one dumb thing now. That was dumb. He accused you before God. Then when he started accusing God before you follow him. And eventually end up getting cursed to the lake of fire. As you can read in Matthew 25th chapter. Man, it was dumb. But that's our initiation. That's the initiation form of sin, brothers and sisters. That's the initiation sin. form of sin in the initiation classroom, that when you see somebody imputing sin, well, you see somebody being an accuser and imputing sin to another creature of God without books in their hand that contains the laws of God, especially when that creature's life or livelihood is on the line, it's only a matter of time before they start accusing God himself and imputing sin to God. It's only a matter of time, because they're already making themselves more than God, by not going through this right procedure that God will go through, and that is to have a book in your hand that contains the laws of God in order to impute sin to a creature, especially when their life and livelihood on the line. And believe me, brothers and sisters, when Satan was accusing all these angels before God, their life and livelihood is on the line. Their life is like, when you accuse God, you that close to God, and somebody coming to him saying you doing this and that, your life and livelihood is on the line. I ain't lying. That's why they were so happy they got rid of it. You read verse 12. Let's go and read that. Verse 11. Revelation 12:11. Let's read that. And they overcame him, talking about the angels, by the blood of the Lamb. The holy angels, who eventually became the holy angels, overcame Satan and his evil angels by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they loved not their lives unto death. I'm going to teach you what all that means. How did the angels had to get under the blood of the Lamb? I'm going to teach you all what that means in another lesson, probably somewhere, either Apprentice class or the master class. I'm going to teach you that though. Verse 12. Therefore, rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth, of the sea, for the devil has come to you having great wrath, because he knows that he hath but a short time. But the thing I want to point out is they said, therefore rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. They was happy when he got his ass kicked out of heaven. Excuse my profanity right there, but they was happy. They was happy. Why? Because he was accusing before God, putting their life in danger, or their livelihood in danger. Whatever they work that they doing, they liked their work, and of course they liked their life. He was putting them in danger when he was accusing them. They was happy when they got rid of them, and we gonna be happy when we get rid of them. Now, that's the initiation form of sin. Being an accuser by imputing sin unto another creature without books in your hand that contains the laws of God, especially when that creature's life or livelihood is on the line. It's only a matter of time. When you do that, it's only a matter of time before you start accusing God and imputing sin unto God, if you're not doing it already. And some people are doing it already, like atheists, Satanists, and scientists. They are already accusing God and imputing sin unto him. So what does that mean to you and me and you and I? They definitely go impute sin to us without books in their hand that contains the laws of God. They go definitely accuse us. That's what it means. They accuse God, they definitely accuse us with the quickness. Now, let's go to our last two places. Let's go to 2 Peter, the second chapter. Let's go to 2 Peter, the second chapter. And we're going to start reading at verse 2. We'll go 2 Peter, the second chapter. We're going to start reading at verse 4. 2 Peter, the second chapter, and we're going to start reading at verse 4. Okay, now let's start reading. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, and what is sin, brothers and sisters? The transgression of the law. And what law they transgress? I just went over the initiation. They start accusing God. That's the sin they did. That's the initiation classroom form of sin. And our fourth form of sin, they start accusing God and imputing sin unto God. They sinned. That's what the sin they did. And they did some other stuff as well. Start reading verse 4 again. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and hell being the earth, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved to judgment. And these chains of darkness means we can't see them. They here, they everywhere, probably, but we can't see them. God put them in the chains of darkness after what happened to in the Garden of Eden. He won't gonna let that happen no more. Especially towards the uncreated woman. If an evil spirit could appear to a created woman, it's like they can't take a candy from a baby. He can allow that to happen. He at least give us, especially the created woman, a fighting chance. So they can't appear. We can't see them. They can't appear no more. And they better not appear, or they gonna get that early torment that evil spirit was asking Jesus not to do to him. And I'm teaching what that early torment is. Another lesson. To be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah the eighth person. Again, these angels were not spared because they sinned. It say verse 4, which I forgot to point out. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, and said here, verse 5, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness. Why were they not spared? Because they sinned, brothers and sisters. When you sin, you transgress the law, the letter of the law. You transgress the spirit of the law. When you worship God in vain and not in good faith. When you impute sin and be an accuser without books in your hand that contains the laws of God. And when you start accusing God, you're not going to be spared. You're not going to be spared like those people in Matthew 7 chapter verse 23 are not spared. We're not spared. You'll be cast to the lake of fire. You're not going to be spared from the lake of fire. Or your life ain't going to be spared like Hezekiah's life was almost not spared. He showed an impromptu moment of humility, finally. Verse 6, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that after should live ungodly. But I brought you guys here to let you know that when you sin, you're not spared. So what does that mean to us? We need to learn what sin is and not do it. And what is sin? What have we learned in this classroom? In these 4 classrooms? That sin is the transgression of the law. The letter of the law, the spirit of the law, not imputing sin to anyone without God's law in our hands, without books in our hands. And if we do the third one, we eventually go impute sin and accuse God. It's only a matter of time because we're already making ourselves more than God by imputing sin without books in our hands that contains the laws of God, which is the procedure that God does. We're going to read verse 9. The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptation, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. So God knows how, as well as God knows how to not spare you from sinning, He knows how to spare you when you keep His law. The letter of the law or the spirit of the law. Like He spared Hezekiah when Hezekiah finally kept the spirit of the law, which means he worshiped God only to be seen of God. He finally showed some humility. God spared him. So what He do to us? Again, Nehemiah taught us that. The great righteous man Nehemiah taught us that. Now, let's go to our last place. Let's go to Leviticus, the 16th chapter. And you can probably hear my voice. I'm getting tired. This lesson has been 2 hours and 37 minutes so far. I didn't even read the whole thing of 2 Peter. I think I skipped verse 8. I didn't even read the whole thing. I'm getting tired. I'm glad we're at the last place. Leviticus, the 16th chapter. Leviticus, the 16th chapter. And we're going to start reading at verse 29. I'm going to finish this. Leviticus 16, we're going to start reading at verse 29. Now, as we first start off this lesson in the Bible, in the beginner's Bible study classroom, we learned that you can sin through ignorance. And if you sin through ignorance, you still can bear your iniquity. Regardless if you know about God's law or not, you still can bear iniquity. And it possibly can't be we could know every last minute point of God's law and every last commandment. And even when we did, we are flesh and we go forget. We go have moments of weakness. We go have moments of anger. We go have moments of folly like God's angels did. We go have all that. What can we do about that? Us sinning in ignorance. We should not never be sinning willfully. But what can we do about us sinning in ignorance, which we are going to do? To save our life, that God will not wipe away our good deeds, and that God can remember us for good. What can we do? Let's read what we can do. Leviticus 16, and what we can do is keep the Day of Atonement, as well as keep all the other commandments, of course. But this is what we can do for that specific reason I just went over. Leviticus 16, verse 29, we're reading about the Day of Atonement. Verse 29, and this, Leviticus 16 and 29, and this should be a statute forever unto you, that in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month. Now, this don't mean July 10th. This is according to the Lord's lunar calendar, which I'm going to teach you. I'm going to run down to you and teach you how to do it in another lesson. But in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall afflict your souls and do no work at all, whether it be one on your own, whether it be one of your own country or a stranger that sojourneth among you. So everybody got to afflict their soul, regardless, Israel and the stranger. Everybody got to afflict their soul. In a way, he talking about, we learn other areas and other scriptures, the way you afflict your soul is to fast. And what does it mean to fast? Nothing goes in the mouth. No water, no bread and water. Nothing goes in the mouth. That's a fast. You're supposed to fast for 24 hours on this day, the 10th day of the 7th month. Verse 30, for on that day should the priest make an atonement for you. The priest will make an atonement for you, to cleanse you that you may be clean from all your sins before the Lord. You need a priest to make atonement for you. Jesus is our priest who made the sin atonement offering for us. But that's the heavenly priest, but you still need another priest to do some certain things. Verse 31, it should be a Sabbath of rest unto you, and you shall afflict your souls by statute forever. And the priest whom you shall anoint, whom he should consecrate to minister in the priest's office in his father's stead, should make the atonement and should put on the linen clothes and even the holy garments. As it is a heavenly priest, and Jesus Christ is the high priest of the order of Melchizedek. You shall also have another priest on the earth, and he's going to make the atonement. Now we don't, but let me finish reading it now. I'll see what I'm going to say. Verse 33, and he should make an atonement for you, for the holy sanctuary, and he should make an atonement for the tabernacle of the congregation and for the altar, and he should make an atonement for the priest and for all the people of the congregation. And this should be an everlasting statute unto you, to make atonement for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. And he did as the Lord commanded Moses. So what are we reading here, brothers? This is about the Day of Atonement. First, we all have to afflict our souls, which means to fast. I'll teach you that when we get to the Day of Atonement lesson. We get into that in that season on the Day of Atonement. Afflicting your souls means to fast, and fast means no water and no food goes in your mouth. Nothing goes in the mouth. But you need a priest to make the offering for the whole entire congregation. Now, the congregation has to be keeping the Day of Atonement now, having a holy convocation and afflicting their souls. They have to do that. And the priest has to make an offering. Now, we don't do animal sacrifice right at this moment. It's coming back when Jesus comes back. But at this moment, we don't do that. So what we have to do in replace of that? You need a priest to pray for you for all the sins you have done in the past year on the Day of Atonement. Especially the sins you've done in ignorance. Well, only the sins you've done in ignorance. You should not be sinning willfully. You need a priest to pray for the whole congregation. Which means what, brothers and sisters? You need a church family. You can't be saying, like people say, I don't need to go to church. I could just be spiritual with God. I could have church in my heart with God. That's all fine and dandy into the Day of Atonement. That's all fine and dandy besides you sinning in ignorance. And you could bear iniquity. And we could also be accursed by God, and you could be rejected by God, all that we read in this lesson. If it wasn't for all that, then yeah. But since you sin in ignorance and can bear iniquity, and we know what that means, you read Matthew 7:23 again, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. That means you can go in the lake of fire. You need to be under the ecclesiastical authority of a priest who will pray for you. And himself, of course, because he has sinned in ignorance too. He has to pray for himself and you for the sins you did in the past year on the Day of Atonement. That's how it works. You need to have a priest. You can't do this. In order for you to do this, in order for you to get this done, again, you have to be keeping the Day of Atonement. You have to be fasting. You have to be keeping the Holy Convocation. And the priest whose command you are under, he has to pray for you. And I guess you would say, ask the priest, have you prayed for me? But seriously, brothers and sisters, this is a serious issue. Your priest has to pray for you. So what should you do, brothers and sisters? You need to find you a priest who's teaching the word of God, the true word of God. You need to find a priest who's actually teaching and keeping the Day of Atonement. Then after that, he need to, on the Day of Atonement, he need to tell you that I pray for you. I'm going to pray for you after the whole congregation, after the lesson, after you guys congregate. Or he can do it before, whenever, but you need to do it on the Day of Atonement. The priest needs to pray for you. It has to be a priest that God is working with, that God trusts, that God honors, that God anointed. And brothers and sisters, Isaiah Jehoiada Israel, who is teaching you now, is one of those priests. It's such a priest. Again, and this is not no shameless plug. This is salvation taught to you. You need to get under the command of a priest like me, so I could pray for you on the Day of Atonement. That all the sins I have done and you have done can be forgiven you, that you have done in the past year. My sins, I have to pray for my sins that I have done in the past year, and the whole congregation sins, which they have done in the past year. The sins they done in ignorance, that they may be forgiven, and that's the only way they're going to be forgiven, brothers and sisters. So forget all that talk that you don't need no church. Forget all that talk, you don't need no church family. You can have church with God, you can just be spiritual. Forget all that talk, because you sin in ignorance. And you need this Day of Atonement, and that priest needs to pray for you. Hope you guys understand that. Now, this is the end of the lesson. We finally ended it. I'm not going to lie, this is the toughest lesson I ever did in the beginning of the Bible study classroom, but it is obviously the longest lesson I did. But I really enjoyed teaching you guys this. In this lesson, hope you guys be patient and listen to this lesson, because this is a very important lesson, especially what we learned in the master class portion of this lesson, that don't be an accuser, imputing sin without books in your hand that contain the laws of God, because when you do that, it's only a matter of time before you start being an accuser against God and imputing sin to God. You're going to start accusing God and imputing sin to him, because you're already making yourself more than God, that imputing sin to one of his creatures without books in your hand that contains the laws of God, which is something God will not do. He goes through the right procedure and only judges someone's, especially when their life and livelihood on the line, with the book in his hand that contains his words and his law. That's the procedure he goes through, and that's the procedure he's going to go through at Judgment Day, and the procedure he goes through right now in our lives, and that's the procedure we should go through in our lives. Do not impute sin to nobody, brothers and sisters. Without no law without no book in your hand that contains the laws of God, do not do that. You are dangerously putting yourself and marking yourself for the lake of fire if you do that. And the other stuff we learned about sin is important as well. Sin, first form of sin is the transgression of the law. Simple as that. Sin is the transgression of the letter of the law. Second form of sin that we learned, that we are not to worship God in vain, but worship him in good faith, meaning we are to only worship him looking to be seen of him. If we worship God looking to be seen of man and get rewarded of man, that is a sin, because Jesus said people who do that are hypocrites, and hypocrites is synonymous with sinners, as we learned in Matthew the 15th chapter. And third form of sin again is imputing sin by being an accuser and imputing sin against another creature without books in your hand that contains the laws of God, especially when their life and livelihood is on the line. And initiation form of sin, fourth form of sin, is when you do the third form of sin. It's only a matter of time before you're going to be an accuser against God and impute sin to God. It's only a matter of time, just like Satan did. All right, that's the end of the 4 levels of lessons. The beginner's Bible study classroom lesson. That's the end of the beginner's Bible study classroom, the end of the apprentice classroom, the end of the master class room, and the end of the initiation classroom. This was the doctrine of the gathering of Israel.